Chapter 3252. Lin Yun's answer left Zhao Lin dumbfounded. He didn't expect her to break his body of the void in this way. Facing the shocked Zhao Lin, Lin Yun said indifferently as she walked towards Zhao Lin. She approached Zhao Lin step by step as if she was taking a stroll. Now that the body of the void is useless, what other tricks do you have? Zhao Lin, who didn't have the body of the void, couldn't arouse Lin Yun's interest at all. Because other than the body of the void, Zhao Lin was too weak in other aspects. He was so weak that it was unbearable to look at. At this moment, Zhao Lin seemed to understand what Lin Yun said before. Yes, he had always placed all his hopes on the body of the void, but he had never thought that once he lost the body of the void, how could he fight with his opponent? He relied too much on the body of the void and neglected the development of other aspects. This was Zhao Lin. He was too biased. It's over. When she was about 5 meters away from Zhao Lin, Lin Yun said indifferently. Then, she suddenly attacked Zhao Lin with a sudden thrust. Her speed was extremely fast. Facing this spear, Zhao Lin could only dodge hurriedly and instantly hide in the void. It's useless. However, to Lin Yun, Zhao Lin's body of the void was already useless. The tip of the spear turned and instantly pierced to the left. Zhao Lin's figure also appeared in the void without any surprise. He was accurately discovered by Lin Yun again. Although he tried his best to block Lin Yun's attack, there was no joy in Zhao Lin's eyes. It was very simple. Lin Yun's spear caused Zhao Lin to fly out. This was the difference in strength between the two. Zhao Lin was no match for Lin Yun at all in a head-on collision. Or rather, the two of them were not on the same level at all. He forcefully stabilized his body, but before Zhao Lin could catch his breath, Lin Yun attacked again. Since she had already decided to end this battle, Lin Yun naturally wouldn't give Zhao Lin any more chances. Damn it! A huge sense of crisis enveloped Zhao Lin's entire being. Facing Lin Yun, he repeatedly had no way to counterattack. The battle that followed was indeed as Lin Yun had said. Although Zhao Lin tried his best to use the void physique to deal with Lin Yun's attacks, Zhao Lin was unable to do anything. But every time, Lin Yun was able to break it with ease. After completely losing the body of the void, Zhao Lin could only passively take a beating. All his efforts now were just to stall for time. It's over. Everyone could see that Zhao Lin was no match for Lin Yun at all. He was completely unable to deal with Lin Yun. At this rate, it was only a matter of time before Zhao Lin was killed. Everyone from the Fire Phoenix Galaxy breathed a sigh of relief, while everyone from the Azure Dragon Galaxy had a solemn look on their faces. Why? Zhao Lin's heart was filled with doubt. Was he really that weak? She didn't even have the strength to fight back against Lin Yun. However, no one could answer his question. Lin Yun also didn't have the slightest intention to pay attention to him. The long sword in her hand fell like a storm. Facing such a violent attack, Zhao Lin found it more and more difficult to resist. The injuries on his body also became more and more serious. Soon, blood dyed Zhao Lin's body red. Although he was still persevering, Zhao Lin's heart was filled with despair. There was no chance of a comeback. Spear shadows filled the sky. Lin Yun's attack speed was extremely fast. It was so fast that people couldn't see how Lin Yun attacked. After some entanglement, Lin Yun successfully seized an opportunity and directly pierced Zhao Lin's chest. The terrifying spiritual power instantly destroyed Zhao Lin's physical body. Even his divine soul couldn't escape the calamity. Zhao Lin died. Perhaps before his death, Zhao Lin didn't think that he would be defeated so easily. In the hands of Lin Yun, he couldn't even stir up a small wave. After killing Zhao Lin and obtaining this crucial victory, Lin Yun's expression didn't even change. She didn't have the appearance that one should have after a great battle. Calmly turning around and walking down the arena, Xiao Chen said with a smile. It seems to be very easy. It's indeed not difficult. His weakness is too obvious. If you go, it will probably be even easier. Xiao Chen was a sword cultivator. As long as he grasped Zhao Lin's weakness, it was indeed easier to kill him. This was the difference in attack power between the two. Overall strength, Xiao Chen and Lin Yun were about the same. However, in terms of attack power, Xiao Chen was indeed much stronger than Lin Yun. Lin Yun's advantage was in her physical body. Hearing Lin Yun's words, Xiao Chen smiled slightly. Wu Qin and the others on the side also came forward to congratulate. Lin Yun won this battle. The overall score between the two sides became 4-4. This was naturally good news for the Fire Phoenix Galaxy. After the Azure Dragon Galaxy lost this battle, no one was happy because both sides were back to the same starting line. Moreover, the next two battles became extremely crucial. If one side won and one lost, it would be a draw and the 11th battle would begin. If both sides lost, then the outcome would be decided. There were only 2 battles left. At this time, the candidates were already very clear. On the Fire Phoenix Galaxy side, Wu Qin took the initiative to stand up. "I'll do it. Brother Xiao Chen is still in charge of the last battle." After getting familiar with Xiao Chen and Lin Yun, Wu Qin also understood the strength of the two. Although he had never seen Xiao Chen fight, Lin Yun said that Xiao Chen's strength was almost the same as his. Xiao Chen's attack power was even stronger than his. Therefore, Wu Qin believed that his strength was inferior to Xiao Chen. Therefore, it was naturally the best choice for Xiao Chen to fight in the last battle. Because even if he lost this battle, as long as Xiao Chen could win the last battle, at least it wouldn't be considered a failure. After saying that, Wu Qin strode onto the stage. On the side of the Azure Dragon Galaxy, an old man quickly walked out. As for the middle-aged man, he had no intention of joining the battle. Clearly, he would be the final trump card of the Azure Dragon Galaxy and would be in charge of the final battle. The two of them stepped onto the stage. Looking at the old man from the Azure Dragon Galaxy, a strange light flashed in Wu Qin's eyes. Then, he said something that confused everyone. "Yang Zhou, I really didn't expect this. I also didn't expect that my final opponent would be you, Wu Qin." Both of them said the other's name immediately. Moreover, they seemed to know each other before. For a moment, everyone from the Fire Phoenix Galaxy and the Azure Dragon Galaxy were a little confused. As people from different galaxies, there shouldn't be any connection between them. Moreover, the relationship between the Fire Phoenix Galaxy and the Azure Dragon Galaxy had always been very bad. It was even more impossible for them to have any connection. Seeking collection, seeking monthly votes, seeking recommendations. Chapter 3253. Looking at Wu Qin and Yang Zhou, who were like old acquaintances, the crowd was confused. How could these two people know each other when they shouldn't have any interaction with each other? Only the middle-aged man from the Azure Dragon Galaxy didn't change his expression, as if he knew the inside story. At this time, Wu Qin and Yang Zhou on the stage spoke again. "I didn't expect you to betray the Fire Phoenix Galaxy back then. Everyone has their own ambitions. Betrayal?" Hearing this, the crowd seemed to have guessed something. That's right, Yang Zhou was once a cultivator from the Fire Phoenix Galaxy, and he had a good relationship with Wu Qin. Back then, Wu Qin, Yang Zhou, and the fallen Chen Zhan came to the Scattered Star Ocean almost at the same time. At that time, the three of them hadn't broken through to the Battle Ancestor realm, but because their strength was similar and their personalities were very compatible, they got to know each other. During that time, the three of them became companions, and in the process, they also formed a deep friendship. However, no one knew what happened to Yang Zhou that made him choose to betray the Fire Phoenix Galaxy. He still remembered that the last time he saw Yang Zhou, he had only said a few strange words to Wu Qin and Chen Zhan. "My path is not in the Fire Phoenix Galaxy." After saying that, Yang Zhou disappeared, and Wu Qin and Chen Zhan found out that he went to the Azure Dragon Galaxy. "What happened back then that made you make such a choice?" Wu Qin looked at Yang Zhou with a complicated gaze and asked. However, Yang Zhou shook his head slightly and said, "It's all in the past. Let's not talk about it. Now that you and I are opponents, let's fight." Perhaps only he knew what happened to Yang Zhou. Seeing that he didn't want to talk about it, Wu Qin didn't ask again. Yes, the two of them were opponents now, so there was no point in talking about it. It was better to fight. The two of them revealed their auras at the same time, and both of them had reached the Battle Ancestor realm great perfection. Until now, the remaining people on both sides were the real powerhouses. At the same time, they took out their divine weapons, which were both long sabers. Unexpectedly, both of them walked the path of Saber Dao. Taking a step forward, they attacked almost at the same time, waving their sabers at each other. Seeing their movements, everyone present was once again stunned. The reason for that was because the two of them were actually using the exact same moves. Why are these two people's moves exactly the same? Cultivated the same martial skill? The two of them actually cultivated the same martial skill. While everyone was still in a daze, Wu Qin and Yang Zhou had already exchanged over 100 moves. In almost an instant, the two of them had completed hundreds of attacks. For a time, the arena could be said to be filled with saber shadows. Everyone could only see two figures shrouded in saber shadows as they fought crazily. Furthermore, the martial skills that Wu Qin and Yang Zhou had used were exactly the same from the beginning to the end. It was like cloning, with different people using the same martial skill to fight. Unlike the others, Xiao Chen and Lin Yun had better eyesight. Other than martial techniques, Xiao Chen had already seen other things. Wu Qin and Yang Zhou's cultivation methods were exactly the same except for their martial skills. This was determined from their auras. Depending on the cultivation technique they cultivated, there would naturally be differences in their auras. It was just like Xiao Chen and Lin Yun. Although their strength was on par, their auras could be clearly distinguished. However, Wu Qin and Yang Zhou were different. Their auras could be said to be exactly the same. Same martial skill, same cultivation technique. Interesting, Lin Yun said with a chuckle. The relationship between Wu Qin and Yang Zhou was probably not as simple as it seemed on the surface. Otherwise, how could the two of them cultivate the same cultivation technique and martial skill? Also, both of them have the 100/saber body. At this time, Xiao Chen said, their cultivation techniques, martial skills, and special physiques were all exactly the same. It was simply like cloning. Other than their appearance, there was almost no difference between the two of them. Hearing Xiao Chen's words, Lin Yun finally noticed the two's special physiques and was a little surprised. It's true. These two guys. The battle in the arena was particularly intense, but at the same time it was full of strangeness. It was the first time everyone had seen such a battle. It was as if they were fighting with themselves. Wu Qin and Yang Zhou seemed to be able to predict each other's next move accurately. Your saber technique is still the same. It hasn't changed at all. Aren't you the same? Hee, but over the years, I've not only cultivated the saber technique left by my master. I've also found a new path in the Azure Dragon Galaxy. After saying that, a black mist suddenly rose from Yang Zhou's body. This aura was full of evil. It was cold, brutal, and cruel. With the appearance of this aura, Xiao Chen and Lin Yun below the arena suddenly frowned. Evil cultivation technique? For the two of them who had come into contact with evil cultivation techniques in the eastern region, the aura that Yang Zhou released was all too familiar. This was because this was an evil cultivation technique. There was no mistake about it. They had already learned from Old Man Donghuang that the evil cultivation technique was originally from the Azure Dragon Galaxy. In fact, it was precisely because of this that the relationship between the Fire Phoenix Galaxy and the Azure Dragon Galaxy was so bad. However, what was surprising was that Yang Zhou had cultivated an evil cultivation technique. Why had his mind not been devoured? Looking at his appearance, He should have been cultivating an evil cultivation technique for a long time, but why did he not feel like his mind was being devoured? Could it be that, like Li Shan, he also had some kind of treasure on him that could resist the corrosion of the evil cultivation technique? The appearance of the black mist directly pushed Yang Zhou's aura to the peak, instantly suppressing Wu Qin. "Is this the reason you betrayed the Azure Dragon Galaxy?" Wu Qin calmly said as he looked at Yang Zhou, who was like a demon god in front of him. As a combat ancestor realm king, Wu Qin naturally had some understanding of evil cultivation technique. He was no stranger to Yang Zhou's aura and could tell at a glance that he had cultivated an evil cultivation technique. Therefore, Wu Qin guessed that the reason Yang Zhou had betrayed the Azure Dragon Galaxy was very likely related to the evil cultivation technique. However, was it worth it to betray the Azure Dragon Galaxy just to cultivate an evil cultivation technique? Did Yang Zhou not know the side effects of the evil cultivation technique? Yang Zhou did not change his expression at Wu Qin's words, nor did he directly answer. He calmly said, "Do you know what Master said about me back then? My talent was not high and my achievements were limited. I spent my entire life in the primordial realm. As for you, you were a genius and deeply loved by Master. He even thought that you could inherit his mantle. The two of us were like two extremes. Although we both worshipped the same Master, we were on opposite ends of the spectrum. The difference was like heaven and earth. Begging for collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations." Chapter 3254. Yang Zhou and Wu Qin were actually fellow disciples. No one had expected such a result. In fact, in the entire scattered star seas, the only person who knew this secret was the fallen Chen Zhan. Yang Zhou and Wu Qin both came from the southern territory and had the same master. However, Wu Qin's talent was much higher than Yang Zhou's, while Yang Zhou was like an ordinary person with limited talent. Therefore, since they were young, their masters had placed all their efforts on Wu Qin. In his opinion, even if he put in a lot of effort, Yang Zhou's achievements would be limited. At most, he would be at the level of an ancient life form. However, Yang Zhou's personality was very strong and he was unwilling to accept his fate. It was also because of this that after their masters died, Yang Zhou and Wu Qin came to the scattered star seas together. Moreover, in the scattered star seas, Yang Zhou relied on his own efforts to break through to the divine ancestor realm. However, this also brought about problems. Because of the limitations of his talent, Yang Zhou could clearly feel that the divine ancestor realm was his true limit. If he didn't find another way, Yang Zhou would never be able to break through to the battle ancestor realm. He watched as Chen Zhan and Wu Qin's cultivation rose step by step, while he couldn't take another step forward no matter what. How could the strong Yang Zhou accept this? However, at this time, Yang Zhou accidentally came into contact with the evil cultivation method of the Azure Dragon Galaxy. As long as he cultivated this evil cultivation method, Yang Zhou could break through to the battle ancestor realm. Moreover, the evil cultivation method of the Fire Phoenix Galaxy could corrode a person's mind because it wasn't complete. It was deliberately done by the Azure Dragon Galaxy. As long as he could cultivate the complete evil cultivation method, his mind wouldn't be corroded and he could break through to the battle ancestor realm. Although it would shorten his lifespan, it wasn't unacceptable for Yang Zhou. He would rather have an instant of brilliance than be eternally ordinary. Therefore, Yang Zhou betrayed the Fire Phoenix Galaxy and went to the Azure Dragon Galaxy. It was because there was hope for him to break through to the battle ancestor realm. This was why Yang Zhou betrayed the Fire Phoenix Galaxy. Hearing this, Wu Qin fell silent. Perhaps he had already guessed this would be the case, because he knew his senior brother's character too well. As soon as his voice fell, Yang Zhou didn't give Wu Qin time to respond. He raised his blade and rushed over. This was a battle that Yang Zhou had been looking forward to for many years. He wanted to prove that he was not weaker than Wu Qinrua. Moreover, after living in the Azure Dragon Galaxy for so many years, Yang Zhou had long since considered himself a member of the Azure Dragon Galaxy. Be it for public or private reasons, Yang Zhou had to win this battle, even if he had to kill his own junior brother. In the face of Yang Zhou's attack, Wu Qin did not waste his breath and chose to attack as well. This time, the two of them did not use the same saber technique, nor did they use the martial skills that their master had taught them. Both Yang Zhou and Wu Qin clearly had a unique understanding of their own saber Dao, since they were already at the War Ancestor realm great perfection. Although they came from the same sect, there was still a clear difference between them. It was even more intense than before. Neither of them had the slightest intention of holding back. Being from different factions, the only thing in their eyes was victory. Xiao Chen, who do you think will win this battle? Lin Yun asked Xiao Chen thoughtfully as she looked at the two people fighting fiercely. With her eyesight, it was difficult to see the difference in strength between the two. It could be said that there was almost no difference. In response, Xiao Chen shook his head. It's hard to say. The strength of these two people is too close. This might be the battle that had the closest strength since the beginning of the battle. It should also be the battle that would be the most entangled battle. With Wu Qin and Yang Zhou's strength, it would be very difficult to determine the winner. In fact, it was indeed so. In the blink of an eye, a day and a night had passed. Yang Zhou and Wu Qin still had not determined the winner, and neither of them had gained any advantage. At this point in the battle, the two of them were still evenly matched. There were many wounds on their bodies, but these wounds were not fatal to the War Ancestor realm kings. As for the consumption, the two of them were about the same. Such entanglement, such an inextricable battle, made everyone present hold their breaths. This battle was really too intense. If it were anyone else, they would not have been able to hold on for so long. However, after such a long battle, the winner was about to be decided. It's coming, Xiao Chen whispered softly. This meant that the winner was about to be decided. As Xiao Chen's voice fell, Yang Zhou and Wu Qin, who were on the stage, attacked at the same time. This attack was obviously the killing move of the two of them. The attacks blasted towards each other at the same time, and then hit each other's vital points at the same time. They were already heavily injured and had consumed a lot of energy. Now that their vital points were hit, the two of them spat out a mouthful of blood. Moreover, cracks had appeared on his body, as if it was about to shatter. Whether it was Yang Zhou or Wu Qin, the two of them had already reached their limit. Neither of them had the ability to continue attacking. Yang Zhou's blade pierced through Wu Qin's heart, and Wu Qin's blade slashed across Yang Zhou's neck. Terrifying spiritual energy raged wildly in the two of them at the same time. The two of them were already unable to stop such destruction. Their divine souls were also heavily injured, and were almost completely destroyed. A dense aura of death enveloped the two of them. However, in the face of impending death, neither Yang Zhou nor Wu Qin had the slightest fear. Yang Zhou even said with a smile, "Master, do you see? I'm not inferior to junior brother." Yang Zhou had been proving himself his whole life, proving that he was not inferior to junior brother. For this, he had sacrificed everything, and now, he had done it. At least, junior brother did not defeat him, and he did not lose. It was as if he had been liberated. In response, Wu Qin said with a complicated expression, "Actually, Master once said that you are too eager to be strong. This is your biggest and most obvious weakness. Master said that your talent is mediocre, but he just hopes that you can understand that strength is not everything. There are many things in this world that are worth paying attention to and cherishing." Wu Qin knew that his master liked Yang Zhou. Although it seemed to be biased, in fact, his master valued Yang Zhou as much as he valued him. It was just that Yang Zhou did not understand. In Yang Zhou's eyes, strength was everything. As senior brother, he should be stronger than Wu Qin. Hearing Wu Qin's words, Yang Zhou was stunned, and a strange look flashed in his eyes. However, it was too late to say this now. Under everyone's gaze, Yang Zhou and Wu Qin's bodies exploded at the same time, turning into two clouds of blood mist. After such an intense battle, the final result was mutual destruction. Begging for collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations. Chapter 32:55. It was a draw. Everyone fell silent as they watched Yang Zhou and Wu Qin die at the same time. The two of them fought fiercely for an entire day and night, but the final result was a draw. Everyone found it hard to accept such a result for a while. In this case, both sides were still 4 against 4. The final battle was especially important. Whoever won would be able to leave safely, and the loser would have to stay here forever and become nourishment for the void-slaying beast. Everyone in the Azure Dragon Galaxy looked at the middle-aged man. The man was called Emofeng, and he was recognized as the strongest person in the Azure Dragon Galaxy. He was obviously the one who was responsible for the final victory. It was the same on the Fire Phoenix Galaxy's side. Xiao Chen was the last person to fight, so everyone looked at him nervously. It's not always good to be the last one to fight. Lin Yun didn't give Xiao Chen too much pressure and just said with a smile. Xiao Chen smiled bitterly. Someone has to be the last one. Xiao Chen and Emofeng both stepped into the arena at the same time. The final battle was about to begin. They looked at each other at the same time. Xiao Chen and Emofeng naturally didn't know each other. With a thought, both of them took out their divine weapons at the same time. Surprisingly, both of them were sword cultivators. Xiao Chen held the dustless sword in his hand, while Emofeng held a black longsword. With their swords in hand, their auras instantly became fierce. Their eyes met, and Emofeng said indifferently, "I've been paying attention to you since the very beginning. There's also that Lin Yun who attacked earlier. The two of you should be the strongest people in the Fire Phoenix Galaxy, right?" Xiao Chen didn't answer, but Emofeng didn't seem to care and continued to speak. "To be honest, I don't have absolute confidence in winning against Lin Yun. I can see that guy didn't use his full strength at all. He won too easily. But I wonder who is stronger between you and Lin Yun?" Emofeng's words were not false. Among the many people in the Fire Phoenix Galaxy, only Xiao Chen and Lin Yun could catch his eye. Lin Yun had shocked Emofeng a little when she fought with Zhao Lin. There was no doubt that Zhao Lin's strength was not weak. However, even so, he was unable to force Lin Yun to reveal her true strength. Anyone could tell that Lin Yun had defeated Zhao Lin effortlessly. It could even be said that she had defeated him effortlessly. Because of this, Emofeng did not have the confidence to defeat Lin Yun. As for Xiao Chen, although he hadn't personally seen Xiao Chen in action, Wind Void trusted his intuition. This Xiao Chen was definitely not simple. According to Emofeng's own guess, Xiao Chen's strength should at least be on par with Lin Yun. Compared to Chunzhan, Wu Qin was definitely much stronger. Although Chunzhan and Wu Qin's strength was not bad, to be honest, Wind Void didn't take them seriously. If he were to fight against either of them, Wind Void was absolutely confident that he would win. Only Xiao Chen and Lin Yun made Wind Void of confidence. However, in this final battle, he had encountered Xiao Chen, one of the two people he was most afraid of. Hearing Emofeng's calm voice, Xiao Chen replied casually, "That's right. Who knows?" Xiao Chen actually didn't know who was stronger between him and Lin Yun. After all, in their usual spars, everyone would stop at a certain point. No one would use their true killing move. Wind Void wasn't surprised when he heard Xiao Chen's answer. It was as if he had already guessed that Xiao Chen would say this. "If I had a choice, I wouldn't want to fight with you because it's too dangerous. As the saying goes, a gentleman doesn't stand under a dangerous wall. I prefer a battle that I have confidence in." Wind Void's character was like this. He didn't have a strong fighting spirit. It had been like this since he was in the Azure Dragon Galaxy. Basically, no one had seen Wind Void fight with his life on the line. In his own words, it was too dangerous. After all, everyone's strength was similar. If he were to fight with his life on the line, no one could say for sure what the final result would be. It was possible that he would kill his opponent, but it was also possible that his opponent would kill him. Such a risky thing wasn't suitable for him. However, it was different this time. Wind Void had no way out. In the body of the Void-slaying beast, if Wind Void lost, he would die. Only by winning could he live. However, his opponent was Shao Chen. For a moment, Wind Void felt a little regretful. If he had known this would happen, he would have entered the arena earlier. That way, he wouldn't have to fight with Shao Chen. In any case, apart from Shao Chen and Lin Yun, Wind Void had absolute confidence in winning against anyone. Unfortunately, there was no medicine for regret in this world. This was already the final battle. There was no way out even if he wanted to. Sigh, it's really troublesome. If I had known this, I wouldn't have come in. Wind Void complained helplessly. Then, a scene that no one expected happened. Without any warning, Wind Void took a step forward and instantly swung his sword at Shao Chen. Just a second ago, he looked like he had a deep grudge. No one could tell that he was planning to attack. However, in the next second, he suddenly launched a sneak attack. This was indeed a sneak attack. Even Shao Chen didn't expect Wind Void to do this. However, at the critical moment, Shao Chen instinctively raised his sword to block and successfully blocked Wind Void's sword. Wind Void's sneak attack didn't succeed. However, he still forced Shao Chen to take a few steps back. However, it didn't cause any damage to Shao Chen. After this exchange of swords, Shao Chen's eyes flashed with surprise. This guy was very strong. He wasn't any weaker than him. Facing such an opponent, he had to be serious. On the other hand, Wind Void's attack didn't succeed. He immediately shook his head in disappointment. What a pity. I thought this attack would catch you off guard. I almost succeeded. But in the end it's fine. If this attack could injure you, then I would have the upper hand. Wind Void didn't mind his sudden attack at all. Moreover, he very calmly stated his goal. This attack wasn't to kill Shao Chen. In fact, Wind Void didn't even think of seriously injuring Shao Chen. It was enough to injure him. After all, the person who was injured first, regardless of whether it was serious or not, it would definitely affect him. At that time, Wind Void would have a slight advantage. It was a pity that Shao Chen's reaction was faster than he had expected. He was able to block his attack without being hurt. Wind Void shook his head and smiled bitterly. In the next second, a sword light flashed. This time, it was Shao Chen's turn to attack. His actions were exactly the same as Wind Void's. He didn't give any warning and attacked as soon as he said he would. The sword light flew straight towards Wind Void. Wind Void couldn't help but curse. I thought you weren't this kind of person. Begging for your collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations. Chapter 3256. No one would have thought that Shao Chen would actually give him a taste of his own medicine. The sudden sneak attack caused Mo Feng's face to turn pale. Lin Yun, who was below, shook her head and smiled bitterly. All along, Shao Chen had never stopped using sneak attacks to deal with his enemies. However, this did not mean that Shao Chen was an old-fashioned person. Since Mo Feng could sneak attack Shao Chen without any pressure, Shao Chen could naturally do the same. Same to you. Hearing Mo Feng's words, Shao Chen said indifferently. He did not think that this method was disgraceful. Mo Feng could only smile bitterly at this. This kind of Shao Chen was the most difficult person to deal with. If Shao Chen did not use sneak attacks to deal with him, Mo Feng would probably be very happy. After all, this way the danger would be greatly reduced. However, Shao Chen's answer was very obvious. He was not such a person. Mo Feng was willing to use any method to win. Similarly, Xiao Chen was the same. The conversation between the two was very brief. Xiao Chen did not give Mo Feng the slightest chance to breathe. Before he finished speaking, Xiao Chen had already appeared in front of Mo Feng in a flash. His sword stabbed out at an extremely fast speed like lightning. Facing Xiao Chen's attack, Mo Feng frowned slightly. He did not dare to be careless and raised his sword to block. Only then did he manage to block Xiao Chen's attack. The two of them attacked at an extremely fast speed. Moreover, it seemed that there was no order to their attacks. What a fast sword! It seems that I have to be serious. Facing Xiao Chen's fierce attack, Mo Feng smiled bitterly in his heart. Long before he attacked, Mo Feng knew that this would not be an easy battle. However, Mo Feng felt that he had underestimated Xiao Chen. Facing such an opponent, if he did not use his full strength, he would not have any chance of winning. Do you know what the strongest swordsmanship in the world is? The expression in his eyes changed. At the same time, he said something extremely inexplicable. The strongest swordsmanship in the world? Has anyone seen it before? Or rather, who would dare to say that their swordsmanship was the strongest? In the beginning, even Mo Feng himself couldn't find the answer to this question. This was also the question that Mo Feng's father had asked him. Wind Mo was born in a large family in the Azure Dragon Galaxy. The Azure Dragon Galaxy was different from the Fire Phoenix Galaxy. The Fire Phoenix Galaxy was ruled by the 4 great imperial palaces and the Central Region's Star Lord. However, the Azure Dragon Galaxy did not have a royal palace. Aside from the supreme ruler, the Azure Dragon Star Lord, the 4 great clans were the most powerful powers in the Azure Dragon Galaxy. The 4 great clans were equivalent to the 4 great palaces of the Fire Phoenix Galaxy, and they all had sovereigns overseeing them. The Mo family that Mo Feng belonged to was one of the 4 great clans. The Mo family's great ancestor was also a ruler. With such a background, Mo Feng naturally enjoyed the best cultivation resources and environment from a young age. It could be said that as long as it was something Mo Feng wanted, there was basically nothing he couldn't get. Coupled with Mo Feng's innate talent, his cultivation journey could be said to be smooth sailing, and he did not encounter any bottlenecks at all. All the way until Mo Feng broke through to the Saint Ancestor realm, his father asked such a question. Feng, what do you think is the strongest sword technique in this world? The strongest sword technique? Is there really a strongest sword technique in this world? This was the answer Mo Feng gave his father back then. Regarding this, his father only smiled slightly. No move is better than having moves. No sword technique is the strongest sword technique. Just for this sentence, Mo Feng stayed in the ancient life form realm for 100 years. Actually, with Mo Feng's talent, breaking through to the Saint Ancestor realm was not difficult at all. However, in order to pursue the so-called strongest sword technique, Mo Feng stopped breaking through. In the following 100 years, Mo Feng only pursued one thing, and that was the strongest sword technique. No move is better than having moves. No sword technique is the strongest sword technique. Only after 100 years did Mo Feng truly comprehend his father's words. All along, many martial artists had been pursuing stronger and higher-grade martial skills. However, they had forgotten one thing. Martial skills were created by people. No matter how strong a martial skill was, it would have flaws. Furthermore, from a certain point of view, martial skills and sword techniques were like a cage. That was because they had moves, and you could only use them according to those moves. If there were moves, they could be broken. If there were no moves, it was equivalent to having no loopholes. A true sword cultivator's every move should be as natural as nature itself. Every swing of the sword would be a sword technique of its own. It would not be restricted by the so-called rules and regulations. It would make the sword a true partner that one could trust. Mo Feng still remembered the 100 years he had spent in the Mo clan. He had always been in the back mountain of the Emo clan, swinging the sword in his hand day after day. There were no moves. In fact, he could not find the slightest similarity between every swing of the sword. He had tried countless ways to swing the sword. It was during this process that Emo Feng truly broke the restrictions on his body. Sword techniques were natural. Why should one be restricted by those so-called sword techniques? No matter what sword technique it was, as long as one was comfortable using it and could help one win in battle, that was the strongest sword technique. This was the foundation of the Emo clan. Emo Feng had used 100 years to successfully comprehend the realm that countless sword cultivators wanted to reach. At this moment, in the ring, a shadow suddenly appeared behind Emo Feng, who was fighting fiercely with Xiao Chen. It was the shadow of a treasured sword. The appearance of the shadow caused Emo Feng's attack to increase by a lot. Seeing the appearance of the shadow, everyone present was stunned at first. Then, one by one, they said in disbelief, "Sword spirit." No one would have thought that Emo Feng had actually comprehended a sword spirit. How was this possible? One had to know that even an emperor would find it difficult to comprehend a sword spirit. What was a spirit? It was a power that could only be obtained after truly comprehending the great path and controlling it. Only by jumping out of the inheritance of the sword path of countless ancestors and finding one's own path would one have the chance to give birth to a sword spirit. It was too difficult to comprehend a sword spirit, but Emo Feng had done it. With a sword spirit, Emo Feng's strength would at least double. I've been feeling strange just now. Emo Feng's sword technique is without any pattern. It's as if he's just randomly slashing. So that's how it is. It's said that after comprehending a spirit, one would jump out of the so-called restrictions of martial arts. With a raise of one's hand, one would be able to form their own martial arts and sword technique. They would be extremely powerful. This is the first time I've seen a martial artist who has comprehended a sword spirit. Emo Feng's strength is probably invincible among kings. This is a bit troublesome. After comprehending spirit power, no one below the Emperor realm would be a match for Emo Feng. For a moment, everyone in the Fire Phoenix Galaxy was a little worried. This was the last battle. If Xiao Chen could not win, then everyone in the Fire Phoenix Galaxy could only stay in the body of the space-killing beast forever. Please collect, vote, recommend. Chapter 3257. Facing Emo Feng, who had comprehended the power of sword spirit, Xiao Chen was clearly suppressed. Seeing such a situation, the people of the Fire Phoenix Galaxy were naturally very worried because this was a battle they could not afford to lose. Whether it was the Fire Phoenix Galaxy or the Azure Dragon Galaxy, they could not afford to lose. Whoever lost would die. Everyone's lives were entrusted to Xiao Chen and Emo Feng. Is there still a chance? The power of sword spirit is too strong. It's probably going to be very difficult. Some people of the Fire Phoenix Galaxy were already in despair because they did not know how Xiao Chen could win. With the power of sword spirit, Emo Feng was in an invincible position. Looking at the way the two of them were fighting, it was not hard to tell that Xiao Chen's every attack was easily blocked by Emo Feng. As for Emo Feng's attacks, Xiao Chen had a hard time blocking them. The most terrifying thing about sword spirit was not only that it could jump out of the so-called swordsmanship and make its attacks natural. The real reason why sword spirit was so terrifying was that once one comprehended the power of sword spirit, it was equivalent to having a kind of instinct in battle. There was no need to think at all. The body would naturally react. In this way, it was completely like cheating. No matter how the opponent attacked, it would be easily blocked. While the Fire Phoenix Galaxy was in despair, the Azure Dragon Galaxy was naturally excited. After all, in the current situation, the Azure Dragon Galaxy was bound to win. The power of sword spirit was an unsolvable existence. There were no flaws at all. There was only one way to defeat the power of sword spirit, and that was to crush it with strength. That's right, apart from crushing it with strength, there were almost no other methods. This was why everyone was so optimistic about Mo Fong. The advantage was firmly grasped by Mo Fong. There was no need to think at all. Mo Fong was completely relying on his instincts to fight. Not only was the speed of his sword extraordinarily fast, but the angle of his attack was also difficult for Xiao Chen to guard against. If this continued, Xiao Chen's defeat was only a matter of time. One needed to use the brain to think, and the other completely relied on the body. It was naturally clear who was stronger and who was weaker at a glance. However, even though he had obtained an absolute advantage, Mo Fong did not feel the slightest bit of joy. He did not even dare to be careless in the slightest. For some reason, Wind Void was certain that Xiao Chen still had some tricks up his sleeve. Based on his conjecture about Xiao Chen, it was impossible for Xiao Chen to be so weak. It was absolutely impossible. Furthermore, even though he had ruthlessly suppressed Xiao Chen, Mo Fong did not see the slightest trace of panic on Xiao Chen's face. It was as if everything was under his control. This was very strange. Because Mo Fong couldn't think of any way that Xiao Chen could turn the situation around, unless he was the same as himself. Xiao Chen seemed to have seen through Mo Feng's thoughts and said softly, "Don't worry, brother Mo, it's still a bit difficult to resist the power of the sword spirit in this state." Originally, he wanted to see if he could block Mo Fong, who had activated her sword spirit mode under normal circumstances. However, looking at the current situation, it was undoubtedly a failure. Regardless of whether it was attacking or defending, Mo Fong seemed to be one step ahead of him, always taking the initiative. This way, Xiao Chen was in a very passive position. Furthermore, as time passed, it was only a matter of time before he was defeated. With the answer and Xiao Chen's words, in the next second, not only Wind Void, but everyone below the stage was dumbfounded, as if they had seen a ghost. How is this possible? Just as Xiao Chen finished speaking, a shadow appeared behind him, just like Wind Void. It was a shadow of a longsword that was no different from the dustless sword. This was the sword spirit? Xiao Chen had actually comprehended the power of the sword spirit. Both of them had comprehended the power of the sword spirit. What kind of monsters were they? For a moment, everyone was in disbelief. Both Wind Void and Xiao Chen had actually grasped the power of the sword spirit, which was extremely difficult to comprehend. How was this possible? However, after being shocked, everyone in the Fire Phoenix Galaxy was overjoyed. Xiao Chen had comprehended the power of the sword spirit. This proved that the outcome of this battle was not certain. Spirit energy? As expected. Only Lin Yun had a calm expression from the beginning. He didn't seem to be surprised that Xiao Chen had comprehended the power of the sword spirit. The reason was very simple. It was because Lin Yun had also comprehended the power of the spear spirit. Since he could comprehend the power of the sword spirit, then Xiao Chen naturally wouldn't be a problem. Therefore, from the beginning, Lin Yun didn't panic too much. He knew that it was impossible for Wind Void to defeat Xiao Chen with just this. Seeing that Xiao Chen had also entered the sword spirit state, Wind Void helplessly revealed a bitter smile. He had guessed correctly. If it were any other time, perhaps Wind Void would be happy if his prediction was so accurate. But now, Wind Void couldn't feel happy at all. If Xiao Chen hadn't comprehended the power of the sword spirit, then the outcome of this battle would have been decided. Unfortunately, this fellow had also comprehended the power of the sword spirit. Alright, let's officially begin now. After entering the sword spirit state, Xiao Chen's attack pattern had undergone a tremendous change compared to before. His attacks were without any pattern, but every single one of them possessed absolutely terrifying power. To put it bluntly, the power of the sword spirit was a kind of state, or a kind of concept. As long as one entered this state, one's combat strength would increase exponentially. Just like Xiao Chen and Wind Void. Both of them had entered the sword spirit state, so their attacks became faster and faster. Instinct against instinct, countless sword images whistled through the air above the stage. The swords in their hands didn't stop for even a second. If it was anyone else in such a battle, even if they were combat ancestor realm kings, they probably wouldn't be able to withstand more than a few moves. That was because there was no time to think at all, and there was no time for him to think. Everything was done based on instinct. Once one's instincts couldn't keep up, then one could only lose. So powerful, is this the power of the sword spirit? It doesn't even give one the slightest chance to breathe. Any slight mistake can be grasped by the opponent. But after entering the sword spirit state, it's impossible for them to make any mistakes. The sword spirit state represents perfection. No wonder people say that the sword spirit state is the symbol of invincibility in the same realm. The difference is too big. Everyone could see that after entering the sword spirit state and before, Shao Qin and Wind Void were completely different. They simply didn't seem like the same person. Not only was the power of each sword terrifying, but it also didn't seem to consume any energy. Moreover, the grasp of various opportunities had reached an unimaginable level. Begging for collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendation. Chapter 3258. Seeing the two of them enter the sword spirit state at the same time, the crowd below the stage was shocked speechless. This was definitely the most exciting battle. Moreover, whether it was Mo Feng or Shao Qin, the strength they displayed was definitely superior to the people before them. Chen Zhan, the array elder, Wu Qin, Zhao Lin, none of them could be compared to the two of them. If it was anyone else, this battle would have ended long ago. After all, spiritual energy was not something that anyone could resist. The battle on the stage continued. 1 day, 2 days, 3 days had passed. Shao Qin and Mo Feng were still fighting fiercely. Moreover, the two of them did not seem to have consumed much of their spiritual energy. It's fake, right? It's already been 3 days. Why is their spiritual energy still so terrifying? Someone said in disbelief. It should be known that even battle ancestor realm kings would consume their spiritual energy very quickly in such an intense battle. It was impossible for them to do what Shao Qin and Mo Feng were doing. In response, another person on the side explained. This is spiritual energy. It uses the least amount of spiritual energy to unleash the most terrifying attack. What do you mean? In layman's terms, for the same attack, you might need to use 100% of your spiritual energy. However, if you've mastered spiritual energy, you only need to use 10%. It's that terrifying? It's a little too heaven-defying. Not only can it increase one's battle strength, it can also prevent consumption. Is spiritual energy really that terrifying? Aside from Lin Yun, no one else had comprehended spiritual energy. Naturally, they did not know how terrifying it was. Only Lin Yun remained calm. With Shao Qin and Mo Feng's strength, it was not strange for them to be able to reach this stage. On the contrary, it was very normal. However, after 3 days and 3 nights of intense battle, the outcome should be decided soon. Shao Qin and Mo Feng also had the same thought in their minds. After such a long and fierce battle, it was indeed time for a victor to be decided. Shao Qin's eyes were still as calm as an ancient well, while Mo Feng was somewhat helpless. At this time, Mo Feng had basically figured out Shao Qin's depth. However, the more it was so, the more uncomfortable Mo Feng felt. The reason was simple. Wind Void couldn't find a way to defeat Shao Qin. With Shao Qin's strength, Mo Feng couldn't find the slightest flaw. There was no way to defeat him. This made Mo Feng feel helpless. However, the outcome of this battle had to be determined. It was impossible for there to be a draw unless the two of them perished together. It was just like Wu Qin and the others. Otherwise, the battle would not have stopped. It's time to decide the victor. Just as Mo Feng was feeling helpless, Shao Qin said faintly. Hearing this, Mo Feng was stunned. Could it be that this guy was still holding back? Even the state of sword spirit has been revealed? Could it be that Xiao Chen still had a trump card? This sentence caused Mo Feng to be dumbfounded for a moment. In his opinion, Xiao Chen's strength was indeed very strong, but it should be on par with him. Even if Xiao Chen was stronger than him, his strength should be very limited. Since Mo Feng couldn't do anything to Xiao Chen, then Xiao Chen shouldn't be able to do anything to him either. But now, Xiao Chen actually said that it was time to decide the victor. This made Mo Feng somewhat unable to understand. Could it be that Xiao Chen still had the confidence to defeat him? This was something that Mo Feng was absolutely unwilling to believe. Looking at Mo Feng's slightly changed expression, Xiao Chen didn't say much. Although he guessed what Mo Feng was thinking, he didn't have the slightest intention to explain. The facts would prove everything. The sword technique in his hand suddenly changed. After a slash was blocked by Mo Feng, Xiao Chen took the opportunity to raise the dustless sword high above his head, and then slashed down fiercely. Monarch sword. As the sword slashed down, a terrifying sword edge instantly streaked across. The space was directly torn apart by the terrifying sword chi. One had to know that this was the interior of the void-slaying beast. The space was completely different from the outside world. Even a battle ancestor realm king couldn't travel through the void here. However, Xiao Chen's slash almost shattered the space. Although he didn't succeed in the end, the cracks that covered the space were enough to shock everyone. After all, in the previous 9 battles, no one was able to do this. All along, the space here was as stable as a rock. Even Mo Feng's eyes began to twitch crazily when he saw this scene. He's simply a monster. Facing Xiao Chen's attack, Mo Feng cursed helplessly. That's right, this Xiao Chen was a monster. If he wasn't a monster, who could do this? Mo Feng even suspected that if it wasn't for the huge gap between a battle ancestor realm king and an emperor realm king, as well as the difference in nature, this monster would have been able to do this. Otherwise, this monster would have been able to challenge someone of a higher realm and challenge an emperor realm king. No matter what, Xiao Chen was definitely the strongest opponent that Mo Feng had ever encountered in his life. He was so strong that even he was a little scared. However, after the shock, Mo Feng quickly regained his calm. The power of Xiao Chen's slash was indeed not bad. It was almost comparable to an Emperor Realm King's attack. However, it was still a little whimsical to want to rely on such an attack to determine the winner. Mobilizing his aura to the peak, Mo Feng continuously slashed out more than 10 slashes, fiercely slashing toward the Emperor's sword. For a time, Mo Feng could only be seen on the stage continuously waving the longsword in his hand, using it to block Xiao Chen's Emperor's sword. Under Mo Feng's frenzied attacks, the Emperor's sword was indeed blocked. Furthermore, after every collision, the might of the Emperor's sword would weaken by a little. In the end, under everyone's eyes, the Emperor's sword was forcibly broken by Mo Feng. It exploded in the air and quickly dissipated. Facing such an outcome, everyone from the Azure Dragon Galaxy clenched their fists tightly, extremely excited. Admittedly, Xiao Chen's slash was indeed very strong. However, in order to unleash such a powerful attack, for Xiao Chen, the burden should have been quite big, right? Therefore, for Mo Feng to be able to block this slash, in the eyes of everyone from the Azure Dragon Galaxy, it was a success. After all, they didn't think that Xiao Chen could use this ultimate move repeatedly. Not only the people from the Azure Dragon Galaxy, but even Mo Feng also thought so. After successfully breaking the Emperor's sword, Mo Feng let out a breath of turbid air and smiled bitterly. What a terrifying slash! I was almost killed. Although he said that, looking at Mo Feng's expression, it was obvious that he was very relaxed. It was obvious that this guy must have thought that this slash was Xiao Chen's trump card. But now, it was blocked by him. As for whether Xiao Chen could use this ultimate move again, in Mo Feng's opinion, he should be able to, but he definitely wouldn't be able to use it many times. In this way, Mo Feng was confident that he could successfully block it. Begging for collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendation. Chapter 3259. He's blocked it. Everyone could guess Mo Feng's thoughts. The people from Fire Phoenix Galaxy were naturally disappointed by such an outcome. The power of Xiao Chen's sword was indeed extremely powerful. Earlier, all of them felt their scalps go numb. But who would have thought that Mo Feng would actually block it in the blink of an eye? What could they do now? Everyone had different thoughts. Only Lin Yun remained calm. There was even a faint smile hanging on the corner of her mouth. She acted as if she didn't hear the discussions around her. These people only thought that Mo Feng could win because he blocked Xiao Chen's sure-kill attack? How naive. The Emperor's sword was indeed Xiao Chen's strongest attack. But Mo Feng was wrong about one thing, and that was the consumption of energy. At this moment, Xiao Chen on the stage spoke. He looked calmly at Mo Feng and said, "I merely blocked a sword. Is there a need to be so happy? Haha, this is your sure-kill attack. Is it not worth being happy about?" Hearing those words, Xiao Chen paused for a moment. Then, he nodded slightly. "You're right. I guess you're thinking that since you've blocked my strongest attack, then I shouldn't be able to do anything to you, right?" Xiao Chen bluntly said what Mo Feng was thinking. Mo Feng didn't deny it. "Indeed, the Emperor's sword is indeed my strongest attack. However, although you've blocked it, there's nothing to be happy about. Because, speaking up to here, Xiao Chen didn't continue. Instead, he used actions to tell Mo Feng. He raised his hand and slashed. It was the Emperor's sword again. Seeing that, Mo Feng tried to block it again. However, before he could successfully break the first Emperor's sword, Xiao Chen attacked again. It was the Emperor's sword again. Mo Feng was completely dumbfounded by the fact that Xiao Chen had used the Emperor's sword twice in a row. This was completely different from what he had expected. How could Xiao Chen use such a terrifying killer move so easily? Shouldn't it consume a lot of energy? Shouldn't it be a trump card? Why was it like this? Wind Void's confidence came from the fact that Xiao Chen couldn't use the Emperor's sword without a limit. But now, seeing Xiao Chen easily use the Emperor's sword twice in a row, Wind Void started to panic. However, he didn't have much time to think because the two Emperor swords were coming straight at him. In response to this, Mo Feng could only use all his strength and continuously slash out attack. In the end, he was barely able to block Xiao Chen's two Emperor swords. Such a scene also shocked everyone present. Was the Emperor's sword Xiao Chen's killer move? If it wasn't, why would it possess such terrifying power? Moreover, Xiao Chen had just admitted that the Emperor's sword was his strongest attack. But if that was the case, why was he able to use it so easily? Could it be that he didn't consume too much energy? Countless questions intertwined in everyone's mind, but at this time, Xiao Chen directly gave the answer. The Emperor's sword does consume a lot of energy. If I'm not in the sword spirit state, I can only use it about 5 times. And if I'm in the sword spirit state, although I haven't tried it specifically, 50 times shouldn't be a problem. Damn, hearing Xiao Chen's words, Wind Void couldn't help but explode. Seeing how easily Xiao Chen said it, Wind Void wanted to curse. Was this a King trump card? An attack that could be casually used dozens of times was a trump card? Moreover, Xiao Chen didn't even need to prepare to use such an attack. Looking at it, it could be said that he could use it casually. This was even more King unacceptable. Was this a casual attack or an ultimate move? So, you can block my Emperor sword. There's nothing to be happy about, unless you can block my next attack. Get ready. He even asked Wind Void to get ready. If it were any other time, even Wind Void would probably curse. But now, he couldn't care less about this. Xiao Chen's combat power was far beyond his imagination. At this moment, the only thing Wind Void thought about was how to block Xiao Chen's attack. Otherwise, he would definitely die here. With a serious expression, he stared at Xiao Chen. Under Wind Void's gaze, Xiao Chen once again raised the dustless sword in his hand. This time, he held the sword with both hands instead of one hand. "It's coming." With a light shout, the dustless sword slashed down. The first Emperor sword was used, but Xiao Chen didn't stop. Soon, he raised the dustless sword again and slashed down for the second time. 2 slashes, 3 slashes, 4 slashes. In an instant, more than 10 Emperor swords whizzed towards Wind Void like a flood. What Xiao Chen said was actually true. He could indeed use the Emperor's sword dozens of times. Moreover, there was almost no time between them. Even the audience below was dumbfounded. This was the first time they had seen someone use their trump card like this. No one would doubt it if he said it was a casual attack. "I can't block it." On the side of the Azure Dragon Galaxy, the Elder of Arrays stared blankly at the battle in the arena and said with some despair. He also didn't expect Xiao Chen's strength to be like this. Before this, the Elder of Arrays, who was no stranger to Wind Void, knew that with Wind Void's strength, it was very likely that he wouldn't be able to block Xiao Chen's attack. It wasn't that Wind Void was too weak, but that Xiao Chen's strength was too strong. It was a little too strong, a little too ridiculous. In almost an instant, Wind Void's resistance was swallowed up by the Emperor's sword. Wind Void's entire body was also drowned by the Emperor's sword. A total of 20 Emperor swords were slashed out. At this time, these 20 Emperor swords had completely swallowed Wind Void. Under the Emperor sword's shroud, both Wind Void's body and spirit suffered a terrifying attack. Even someone as strong as Wind Void couldn't block such an attack. It was difficult for him to hold on. He could clearly feel that his body was showing signs of collapse, and his spirit was constantly being torn apart. "Am I going to die?" At this time, Wind Void finally realized a fact, and that was that he was probably going to die this time. Who would have thought that such a freak was hidden in the Fire Phoenix Galaxy, and that he had become his opponent? Could someone of the same level really defeat such a person? Putting everything else aside, Wind Void believed that even if an Emperor were to come, they wouldn't dare to underestimate Xiao Chen's final series of attacks. "I really don't know how strong this guy will be when he breaks through to the Emperor realm. If he was already so strong now, what would happen when Xiao Chen broke through to the Emperor realm? Perhaps even among the Emperors, it would be very difficult for anyone to contend against him." Begging for collection, begging for votes, begging for recommendations. Chapter 3260. Mo Feng's body was completely enveloped by the Emperor sword, so no one could see his current situation. However, it wasn't difficult for the crowd to guess that Mo Feng was in danger in the face of such a terrifying attack. It was almost impossible for him to survive such an attack. "It's over. We're all going to die here. No, I don't believe that we can't defeat the void-slaying beast with so many of us." "That's right. Even if we can't defeat it, we can't just give up like this." Mo Feng's death meant that the Azure Dragon Galaxy's side was completely defeated. According to the rules of the void-slaying beast, all of them had to stay here. At the thought of dying here, the Azure Dragon Galaxy's people were naturally unwilling and decided to give it their all. Compared to them, the Fire Phoenix Galaxy's people were much more relaxed. From the current situation, there was basically no problem with this battle. Xiao Chen's victory was already inevitable, and Mo Feng probably wouldn't be able to survive this attack. Not only would the Fire Phoenix Galaxy's people be safe, but they would also be rewarded by the void-slaying beast. Although the void-slaying beast was very mysterious, from the people who had entered the void-slaying beast and returned alive, the reward was very generous. The Azure Dragon Galaxy's people were in despair, but the Fire Phoenix Galaxy's people were overjoyed and even looked forward to the next reward. Under everyone's gaze, the terrifying sword on the stage slowly dissipated. The surrounding space also quickly healed. When everything returned to normal, the crowd discovered that Mo Feng's figure had already disappeared. Xiao Chen must have obliterated him, and not even his body was left behind. Seeing Mo Feng's death, the Fire Phoenix Galaxy's people couldn't help but clap and cheer. They finally won. The people who had been on tenterhooks could finally breathe a sigh of relief. They didn't have to worry about being killed by the void-slaying beast. Xiao Chen, who had won, still looked incomparably calm, as if he didn't feel the slightest joy from killing Mo Feng. He sheathed his sword, turned around, and slowly walked down the stage. He came to Lin Yun's side and looked at Xiao Chen, who had just experienced a great battle. Lin Yun smiled. "Congratulations. He's a decent opponent, but unfortunately, he's still a little too weak," Xiao Chen indifferently replied. He approved of Mo Feng's strength. At least, Mo Feng was definitely not weak. While the two of them were talking, a sudden change occurred in the Azure Dragon Galaxy. Pillars of light descended from the sky, instantly enveloping everyone. Everyone knew that it was the doing of the sky-slaying beast. Now that the battle was over, it was time to fulfill the promise. The Azure Dragon Galaxy had been defeated, so all of them had to die. Enveloped by the pillars of light, the people from the Azure Dragon Galaxy began to attack one after another. They would not allow themselves to be captured without putting up a fight. Even in the face of the void-slaying beast, the people of the Azure Dragon Galaxy would fight with all their might instead of waiting for death. Unfortunately, when the attacks of the Azure Dragon Galaxy's people hit the light pillar, they had no effect at all. Not even the slightest ripple appeared. It was as if these light pillars were completely immune to everyone's attack. The people of the Azure Dragon Galaxy grew more and more desperate. Was this the strength of the void-slaying beast? It was no wonder that even the sovereigns were afraid of the void-slaying beast. There was no use resisting at all. It seemed that the people of the Azure Dragon Galaxy only had one choice, which was to wait for death. Yes, there was no way to resist at all. In the face of the overwhelming strength of the void-slaying beast, the people of the Azure Dragon Galaxy could only resign themselves to fate and wait for death. Under the gaze of the people of the Fire Phoenix Galaxy, some terrifying power seemed to have erupted from the pillars of light. One by one, the martialists of the Azure Dragon Galaxy began to be obliterated. Their physical bodies seemed to be intact, but their spirits were constantly being obliterated. Once the spirit disappeared, it would be useless even if the physical body was left behind. It would still be equivalent to death. Seeing the deaths of the people of the Azure Dragon Galaxy, Xiao Chen seemed to know where the puppets he had encountered before had come from. Previously, he had found it strange. Those puppets did not seem to have been refined at all, so how did they become puppets? Now, it seemed that their spirits had been obliterated and were controlled by the void-slaying beast. After the people of the Azure Dragon Galaxy lost their spirits, their physical bodies could only become puppets in the hands of the void-slaying beast from now on. They had no chance of resisting at all. Everything happened too quickly. From the beginning to the end, it only took more than 100 breaths. After the spirits of the people of the Azure Dragon Galaxy were obliterated, the pillars of light disappeared with their physical bodies as if they had never appeared. Although Xiao Chen and the others were not happy about the deaths of the people of the Azure Dragon Galaxy, they were not sad at all. After all, they were not companions. Moreover, in the future, the Azure Dragon Galaxy would very likely be a great enemy of the Fire Phoenix Galaxy. Sooner or later, a great war would break out between the two sides. Therefore, their deaths were still good news for the Fire Phoenix Galaxy. It's over. Yes, it's over. Xiao Chen and Lin Yun spoke one after another. At the same time, another pillar of light descended from the sky and enveloped Xiao Chen and the others. Of course, this time, the pillar of light was not to kill Xiao Chen and the others. Instead, it was to reward them. After winning the final victory, Shao Chun and the others were qualified to receive the reward of the void-slaying beast. As the pillar of light enveloped them, Shao Chun seemed to have something extra in his mind that did not belong to him at all. At first, he did not have much of a reaction. However, as these memories continued to increase, even Shao Chun was shocked. The method to comprehend the origin energy. He did not expect the reward given by the void-slaying beast to be so precious. It was actually the method to comprehend the origin energy. In addition, Shao Chun also obtained a trace of the origin energy seed. With this seed, it would be easier for Shao Chun to comprehend the origin energy in the future. If there were no accidents, Shao Chun would have a 99% chance of successfully comprehending the origin energy. Lin Yun's reward was the same as Shao Chun's, but it was different for the others. In other words, those who participated in the battle received the same reward, but those who didn't participate in the battle received much less. There was only the method to comprehend the origin energy, but there was no seed of the origin energy. Compared to the method of comprehending origin energy, the seed of origin energy was undoubtedly more precious. Moreover, it wasn't just a little bit. However, no one knew what they had obtained. Everyone's face was filled with shock and ecstasy. Please collect, vote, recommend. Chapter 3261. After a whole day and night, the light pillar slowly disappeared, and Shao Chun and the rest had improved tremendously. Although there was no obvious improvement in their cultivation, the reward this time made everyone wild with joy. After all, the method to comprehend the origin energy was something they had to master to break through to become an emperor. Everyone present was a king of the war ancestor realm. To put it bluntly, everyone wanted to break through to become an emperor one day. Now that they had received the reward, they seemed to see a glimmer of hope. Although it was just a little more chance, it did not guarantee success. In fact, there might only be a few people who could break through to become an emperor in the end. However, it was enough to make everyone excited. As the light pillar disappeared, a space passage appeared at the side. It was a space passage that led to the outside world. As the winner, Shao Chun and the rest could now leave the inside of the void-slaying beast. Just as the matter inside the void-slaying beast was over, on the other side of the Emperor Dong's palace, Old Man Dong Huang, Zi Xian, and Lai Wan sat together. I wonder how Shao Chun and the rest are doing. Yeah, Shao Chun and the rest entered the void-slaying beast. There's no news yet. Of course, they knew about the appearance of the void-slaying beast in the scattered star sea. Old Man Dong Huang even contacted the Fire Phoenix Star Lord about it. Unfortunately, the Fire Phoenix Star Lord did not intend to forcefully attack the void-slaying beast, so everything depended on Shao Chun and the rest. There's nothing we can do now. Although the void-slaying beast is dangerous, it's an opportunity for Shao Chun and the rest, Old Man Dong Huang said faintly. Dong Huang said faintly. Even though he was an emperor, he did not have a good way to deal with the void-slaying beast. The only thing worth mentioning was that the void-slaying beast had its own set of rules for some reason. Those who had entered the void-slaying beast and returned safely knew that as long as they were on the winning side, they could leave safely. There had never been an exception to this. Now, they could only hope that Shao Chun and the rest could succeed in winning inside the void-slaying beast. Just as Old Man Dong Huang, Zi Xian, Lai Wan, and the rest were worried, Shao Chun and the rest gradually appeared on Constellation Island in the disarray Star Sea. Through the space tunnel, Shao Chun and the others had safely left the body of the void-slaying beast and returned to the scattered Star Sea. As Shao Chun and the others left, the void-slaying beast also disappeared. The original entrance disappeared completely. No one knew how the void-slaying beast appeared or what it looked like. As Shao Chun and the others appeared, the two rulers who had rushed over from the Central Territory appeared in front of everyone. Looking at the people in front of them, The two rulers naturally guessed that the Fire Phoenix Galaxy had won the battle inside the space-killing beast's body. Both of them revealed a look of satisfaction in their eyes, but one of them still asked, "Which galaxy did you meet?" "Azure Dragon Galaxy." In response, Shao Chen replied. He could tell at a glance that the two of them were rulers. Hearing Shao Chen's answer, the two rulers were slightly stunned. Currently, the relationship between the Fire Phoenix Galaxy and the Azure Dragon Galaxy was deteriorating. Both sides were already preparing for a possible war. At this moment, inside the space-killing beast, Shao Chen and the others had actually met the people from the Azure Dragon Galaxy and had even won. It had to be said that this was indeed good news, at least for the Fire Phoenix Galaxy. No matter in which aspect, as long as they could suppress the Azure Dragon Galaxy, it would be good news for the Fire Phoenix Galaxy. Not bad, not bad. Looking at Shao Chen and Lin Yun with satisfaction, the two rulers nodded and praised. With their eyesight, it was not difficult for them to see that among the crowd, Shao Chen and Lin Yun were the strongest. In that case, in the previous battle, the two of them must have also been the decisive factor in the victory. Without saying anything more, the space-killing beast disappeared, and this matter came to an end. The two rulers asked a few simple questions and then prepared to leave. It was an eventful time, and the two of them could not stay in the scattered star sea for too long. There were still many things that they needed to deal with in the central region. However, before leaving, the two of them smiled at Shao Chen and Lin Yun. "You should be Shao Chen and Lin Yun from Emperor Dong's palace, right? Old Dong Wang personally came to find us. Now that everything is fine, I guess that old man is relieved. If you go to the central region in the future, you can come and find me." He directly pointed out their identities. Hearing this, Shao Chen and Lin Yun both nodded in response. After the two rulers left, the kings of the scattered star sea also dispersed one after another. However, before each of them left, they all extended an invitation to Shao Chen and Lin Yun. Everyone had witnessed their strength. In their eyes, as long as Shao Chen and Lin Yun did not die, they would definitely break through to the ruler realm. Therefore, it would only be beneficial to establish a good relationship with Shao Chen and Yi Zichen at this time. In this regard, Shao Chen and Lin Yun only nodded with a smile and did not give any promises. After everyone left, only Shao Chen, Lin Yun, and the Qin Yun sect's ancestor were left. The Qin Yun sect's ancestor was considered lucky. He did not make a move from the beginning to the end, but in the end, he got a bargain for nothing. "Shall we go back?" Looking at Shao Chen and Lin Yun, the Qin Yun sect's ancestor asked respectfully. "Let's go." Now that the matter here was over, it was time to return to the Qin Yun sect. He did not know if Long Qing, Lin Yuan, and the others had come out of closed-door cultivation. Just as he was about to leave, a spatial spirit boat slowly came over. It was the spatial spirit boat that Shao Chen and the others had taken before. Needless to say, the person driving was naturally Feng Ling. This woman actually did not leave and had been waiting here. Looking at the slender and elegant Feng Ling on the deck, Shao Chen and Lin Yun looked at each other and revealed a faint smile. It was definitely not a coincidence that this woman appeared here, and it was even more impossible that she had good intentions. He had a favor to ask of her, but he still did not know what this woman was after. Compared to Shao Chen and Lin Yun, the Qin Yun sect's ancestor was frowning slightly. Feng Ling gave him a very dangerous feeling. Moreover, this woman was trying her best to get close to Shao Chen and Lin Yun. What was her goal? Was it to unify the entire East Star continent? If that was the case, then the Qin Yun sect would definitely not be spared. As the Qin Yun sect's ancestor, he naturally would not agree to this matter. "Senior, it's great that you're fine." Arriving in front of Shao Chen and Lin Yun, Feng Ling smiled and bowed. From the looks of it, she was really touched and happy that Shao Chen and the others returned safely. "Why didn't you leave?" In response, Shao Chen asked with a smile. begging for collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations. Chapter 3262. Since the two seniors haven't left yet, I naturally won't leave first. Feng Ming replied respectfully to Xiao Chen's question, looking sincere. However, both Xiao Chen and Lin Yun scoffed at this. The woman had done so much, so she must have some other purpose in mind. However, Xiao Chen and Lin Yun didn't care. In any case, the two of them would leave the scattered star sea sooner or later. What Feng Ming wanted to do had nothing to do with them. The three of them quickly boarded the spatial spirit ship and headed towards the East Star continent. Although the Qing Yun sect's patriarch was unwilling to be with Feng Ming, he had no choice since Xiao Chen and Lin Yun had boarded the ship. Just like before, as soon as they boarded the ship, the Qing Yun sect's patriarch and Lin Yun returned to their rooms to cultivate. Xiao Chen was not interested in paying attention to Feng Ming and also returned to her room. However, not long after, Feng Ming took the initiative to look for her. "Senior, what's the matter?" Looking at Feng Ming standing at the door, Xiao Chen said indifferently. Perhaps knowing that Xiao Chen and Lin Yun were about to leave the scattered star sea, Feng Ming didn't hesitate this time and mustered up her courage to speak. "To be honest, I do have a request. As long as Senior is willing to help, I am willing to pay any price." To be honest, Feng Ming was indeed very tempting, but to Xiao Chen, beauty was no longer of any use to her. Therefore, it was impossible for Feng Ming to use her to move Xiao Chen. Moreover, even if Feng Ming didn't say anything, Xiao Chen could roughly guess it. Therefore, without waiting for Feng Ming to speak, Xiao Chen spoke directly. "To the scattered star sea, we are just passers-by. It doesn't matter to me who dominates the scattered star sea. Therefore, you don't have to waste time on me. What you do, how you do it, and what methods you use have nothing to do with me, and I don't want to be involved. You are a smart person. You should know what I mean." Xiao Chen intended to completely cut off Feng Ming's thought. Feng Ming was dreaming if he wanted to use them to rule the East Star continent or the Disarray Star Sea. Hearing Xiao Chen's words, Feng Ming fell into silence. Perhaps she had already guessed that this would be the outcome. After all, with Xiao Chen and Lin Yun's current status, how could they still be used by others? Beauty and treasures were almost useless to Xiao Chen and Lin Yun. He stared at Xiao Chen without blinking. Seeing this, Xiao Chen directly ordered him to leave. "If there's nothing else, you may leave. There's no need to continue wasting time on me." Xiao Chen knew that Feng Ming would definitely be able to understand what he was trying to say. However, what Xiao Chen did not expect was that after hearing this, not only did Feng Ming not leave, he even knelt in front of him. Seeing how persistent and unreasonable Feng Ming was, Xiao Chen's face darkened. This Feng Ming was a little ungrateful. Xiao Chen was displeased, and there was a faint pressure around him. Under the shroud of Xiao Chen's pressure, Feng Ming's face became extremely ugly, but he still stubbornly gritted his teeth and persisted. "Senior, I don't want to rule the East Star continent or the Disarray Star Sea. I just want to take revenge and obtain power." Feng Ming had been taken in as a disciple by the Dragon Phoenix Valley's ancestor since he was young. He and Long Lai were fellow disciples. However, before this, even Long Lai and his son did not know where Feng Ming came from. In other words, Feng Ming had concealed her origin. She was not from the Disarray Star Sea, but the Feng people from the Central Region. The Feng people were a large clan in the Central Region. They were the descendants of the ancient Divine Phoenix. The Feng people had always been a large clan in the Fire Phoenix galaxy. Although the Feng people had their ups and downs in the long river of history, they had never declined from the beginning to the end. Firstly, it was because of the Feng people's foundation. Secondly, it was because of the Feng people's bloodline. Even now, there were still two rulers among the Feng people. There were actually two rulers in one clan. This kind of strength was even more powerful than the Emperor Dong's palace. As a direct descendant of the Feng people, Feng Ming hated his own clan to the bone. The reason was very simple. Feng Ming's bloodline had been extracted by someone. As a God-favored child when he was born, when Feng Ming was born back then, it could be said to have caused a sensation among the Feng people. Even the great ancestor personally said that Feng Ming's talent was definitely that of a ruler. Unfortunately, his top-notch talent also attracted the covetous eyes of others. In particular, Feng Ming's parents had died early, so she had lived with her aunt since she was young. However, her aunt was the person who had personally pushed her into the abyss. For the sake of her son, Feng Ming's aunt took action to extract Feng Ming's bloodline. This also caused Feng Ming's talent to plummet, and she was still unable to break through to the warlord realm. If it were not for her good luck back then, Feng Ming would not have been able to escape to the scattered star sea and live until now. Therefore, since she was young, Feng Ming had always wanted to obtain strength because she wanted to take revenge for her aunt and brother. One had extracted her bloodline, and the other had inherited her bloodline. Feng Ming swore that she would not let these two people off. Unfortunately, without the power of her bloodline, Feng Ming knew that it would be difficult for her to take revenge on her own. Putting everything else aside, her brother, who had inherited her bloodline power, was already at the peak of the warlord realm. He was extremely powerful, and was not someone Feng Ming could contend against. Feng Ming had been trying to rope in Xiao Chen and Lin Yun because she wanted them to become her helpers and help her take revenge in the future. Feng Ming had never told anyone about these things, but now he was telling Xiao Chen about it. Because Feng Ming knew that this was her only chance. If she did not say these things, Feng Ming would no longer have the chance to take revenge. Unfortunately, after listening to Feng Ming's narration, Xiao Chen's face was still calm and did not change at all. Glancing at Feng Ming indifferently, Xiao Chen said, "What does what you said have to do with me?" Indeed, from Feng Ming's words, her experience was indeed very tragic, but so what? Just because of this, she wanted Xiao Chen to provoke the Feng people who are like behemoths? This was obviously impossible. A force that was even larger than the Emperor Dong's palace. If it was not for the fact that there was no other choice, who would want to go against it? Not to mention helping an unrelated person. Hearing Xiao Chen's words, Feng Ming immediately spoke. "Senior, as long as you are willing to help, I am willing to pay any price, even if I have to be a servant. Be a slave or a maid." Hearing this, Xiao Chen waved her hand and said, "No need, I can't help you with this. You don't have to say anything more to me. Let's go." Feng Ming's matter was very difficult to handle, and Xiao Chen did not want to be involved. Hearing Xiao Chen's words, a look of disappointment flashed across Feng Ming's eyes. Begging for collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations. Chapter 3263. Feng Ming's experience was very tragic. As a direct descendant of the Feng people, she was harmed and her bloodline was taken away because of her talent. She had even been hunted down since she was young. Even so, Xiao Chen had no intention of making a move because Xiao Chen really did not want to provoke the Feng people. It was impossible for him to provoke an entity that was even more powerful than Emperor Dong's palace for such a reason. Xiao Chen was not a saint. There were too many unfair things in this world. Who could control them all? Not to mention Xiao Chen, even old man Dong Huang would not be able to handle the matter that involved the Feng people. This was because the Feng people had the right to not give old man Dong Huang face. He forcefully chased Feng Ming away, shook his head, and stopped thinking about these things. After leaving Xiao Chen's place, Feng Ming did not go to Lin Yun's place again. She also knew that Xiao Chen's attitude actually represented Lin Yun's attitude. Feng Ming could understand Xiao Chen's choice. However, if even Xiao Chen and Lin Yun were not willing to help her, Feng Ming really did not know who else could help her take revenge. The Dragon Phoenix Valley? Although the Dragon Phoenix Valley was now firmly in Feng Ming's hands, the Dragon Phoenix Valley was just an ant in front of the Feng people. They did not take it seriously at all. As for Feng Ming's own cultivation, to put it bluntly, after her bloodline was extracted, even if she used all her methods, Feng Ming would at most break through to the combat ancestor realm. This was achieved by using many extreme methods. For example, imprisoning Long Mo and using the spiritual power in Long Mo's body to help her break through. However, so what if she broke through to the combat ancestor realm? A combat ancestor realm king might be very strong in the eyes of ordinary people, but in the eyes of the Feng people, she was nothing. There were at least 10 combat ancestor realm kings among the Feng people. Without becoming a ruler, Feng Ming did not even have the qualifications to confront the Feng people head-on. Originally, Feng Ming felt that Xiao Chun and Lin Yun had the temperament of an emperor, so she wanted to rope them in. Otherwise, why didn't she rope in the Qin Yun sect's old ancestor? Without the bearing of an emperor, it was impossible for one to look like a phoenix. According to the previous plan, if Xiao Chun and Lin Yun were willing to help him, then when they broke through to become rulers, they might be able to help him. But now it was obviously impossible. Xiao Chun was not willing to get involved in this mess. After a few days, the spatial spirit boat entered the East Star continent and flew directly towards the Blue Cloud sect. For a few days, Xiao Chun and Lin Yun didn't show up. It was only when the spatial spirit boat arrived at the Qin Yun sect that Xiao Chun and Lin Yun came out of their room. However, the two of them did not have the intention to pay attention to Feng Ming. They took a step forward and disappeared on the spot. Looking in the direction where Xiao Chun and Lin Yun left, Feng Ming gritted her teeth. Her heart was filled with unwillingness, but there was nothing she could do. She naturally did not dare to force Xiao Chun and Lin Yun's sect. Otherwise, with Xiao Chun's character, he would probably kill her directly. She was extremely dejected as she drove the spatial spirit boat away. Xiao Chun and Lin Yun turned a deaf ear to this. When the two of them returned to their residence, they learned from Wang Xian, the sect master of the Qin Yun sect, that Long Qing, Lin Yuan, and the others had already come out of closed-door cultivation. Moreover, their cultivations had all broken through to the divine ancestor realm. Long Qing and the others had come out of closed-door cultivation. This was naturally good news. Moreover, after breaking through, everyone's strength was clearly incomparable. After all, the gap between ancient creatures and the divine ancestor realm could be imagined. At the residence, they saw Long Qing and the others who had already come out of closed-door cultivation. When she saw Xiao Chun, Long Qing took the initiative to welcome him and said somewhat reproachfully, "Little brother, you're still so reckless. You really worried me to death." Long Qing was obviously talking about the matter of the void-slaying beast. Such a big matter had naturally spread long ago. It was not strange that the Qin Yun sect knew about it. Knowing that Long Qing was worried about him, Xiao Chun also replied with a smile, "Aren't I fine? Second sister, you don't have to worry." You still have the cheek to say that. You have to know that a person can't always be so lucky. If you encounter such a thing in the future, you must be more careful. Yes, I know. In fact, the matter of the void-slaying beast could not be blamed entirely on Xiao Chun. After all, who would have thought that a place that was suspected to be the tomb of an emperor would actually be the void-slaying beast? The current Xiao Chun was indeed different from when he was young. He had lost a lot of the hot-bloodedness of his youth, and had become more cautious and careful. It could not be helped. Once a person had more considerations, they naturally could not be unscrupulous. For example, if Feng Ming's matter had happened when he was young, Xiao Chun might have considered helping. However, Xiao Chun refused without hesitation at all now. Firstly, it was because there were too many ties around him, such as his family, parents, wife, and children. For the sake of their safety, Xiao Chun naturally could not be so impulsive anymore. Secondly, he had seen too many things, so some things did not affect him as much. After comforting Long Qing, Lin Yun also started chatting with Lin Yuan, the monk, the Taoist priest, and the others. Then, everyone sat together and discussed the matter of going to the central region. Speaking of which, they had gained a lot in the scattered star sea this time. Whether it was Long Qing, Lin Yuan, Shao Chen, or Lin Yun, they had all gained something. Now that Long Qing, Lin Yuan, and the others had come out of seclusion, it was time to leave. After all, the central region was their real destination. They could not stay in the scattered star sea forever. They decided to set off early the next morning. After a night of silence, the next morning, they learned that Shao Chen and the others were preparing to leave. Wang Xian and the Qin Yun sect's ancestor sent them off at the same time. Facing people like Shao Chen and Lin Yun who could break through to the emperor stage at any time, the Qin Yun sect's ancestor obviously wanted to befriend them. It was fine now because everyone was a king of the war ancestor realm. However, once Shao Chen and Lin Yun broke through to the emperor stage, it would be completely different. Therefore, it was naturally a good thing for the Qin Yun sect's ancestor to take advantage of this opportunity to build a good relationship with Shao Chen and Lin Yun. Shao Chen and Lin Yun knew very well what the Qin Yun sect's ancestor was thinking, but they did not care. After all, it was hard to say if they would be able to meet again in the future. There was no need to take these things to heart. Everyone, this is a small token of my appreciation. When he was sending them off, the Qin Yun sect's ancestor took out an interspatial ring and gave it to Shao Chen. There were many medicinal pills, fine wine, spirit stones, and so on inside. Although these things were nothing to Shao Chen and the others, they still had to express their sincerity. Shao Chen smiled and did not refuse. He accepted the interspatial ring and cupped his hands to the Qin Yun sect's ancestor with a smile. Then let's part ways here. Without saying anything else, Shao Chen and the others boarded the spatial spirit boat and left without the slightest bit of reluctance. Begging for collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations. Chapter 3264. Shao Chen and the others left without the slightest reluctance. To them, there was indeed nothing worthy of nostalgia in the scattered star sea. Although the scattered star sea was indeed a little special compared to the other 5 regions, Shao Chen and the others were just passers-by. After Shao Chen and the others left, Feng Ming, who was in the Dragon Phoenix Valley, received the news immediately. However, this time, Feng Ming did not take any action. Ever since she had talked to Shao Chen on the spatial spirit ship, Feng Ming understood that it was impossible for Shao Chen to take action for her. Since Shao Chen was unwilling to take action, Feng Ming could only rely on herself. She also understood that it was almost impossible to take revenge with her own strength. It could even be said to be a fool's dream. However, even after a few times, Feng Ming still could not forget the hatred in her heart. She had to take revenge. After so many years, she had always insisted on taking revenge. If she let go of her hatred, Feng Ming really did not know how she could live. If she wanted to take revenge first, she could only start with the Dragon Phoenix Valley. Long Mo and his son were useless now. She could only wait for her to refine all the spiritual energy in Long Mo's body. After her cultivation broke through to the war ancestor realm, Feng Ming could directly execute the father and son and truly control the Dragon Phoenix Valley. A small Dragon Phoenix Valley was nothing to Feng Ming. Moreover, after so many years of preparation, the entire Dragon Phoenix Valley had long become her confidant. Right now, Feng Ming only needed to say a word and Long Mo and his son would lose control of the Dragon Phoenix Valley. She would also become the true master of the Dragon Phoenix Valley. However, now was obviously not the time. Everything had to wait until she broke through to the war ancestor realm. In Feng Ming's plan, the Dragon Phoenix Valley was the first step of her revenge and the most important power in her hands. Although the Dragon Phoenix Valley was like the difference between the stars and the bright moon when compared to the Feng people, there was no other way. Feng Ming had worked hard enough, and it was not easy to reach this step. Everything could only be done slowly. At least with the Dragon Phoenix Valley, she had not gained nothing after so many years. He did not know what Feng Ming was thinking, nor did he realize how crazy Feng Ming would be after they left the East Star continent. Moreover, under Feng Ming's madness, she had unified the entire East Star continent in just a few years. The Azure Cloud sect and other large sects were destroyed by Feng Ming one after another. Xiao Chun and the others didn't know anything about this, nor did they care about it. What did the East Star continent have to do with them? Even if the East Star continent was destroyed tomorrow, Xiao Chun and the others wouldn't care too much. The distance from the Disarray Star Sea to the central region was not too far. If one rode the spatial spirit boat and traveled at full speed, it would not take long to reach the central region. However, Xiao Chun and the others didn't care too much about the time. They headed towards the central region at a leisurely pace. Along the way, they passed by some continents. Since they had nothing to do, Xiao Chen's group would stop for a few days to enjoy the local wine and stroll around. Just like that, it took several months for Xiao Chen's group to finally enter the central region. As the center of the entire Fire Phoenix galaxy, the central region had the most powerhouses. Moreover, when one entered the central region, they had to undergo inspection. This was to prevent people from other galaxies from sneaking into the central region. Finally, the entire central region was covered by a huge formation set up by the Star Lord. This was a defensive formation and also a detection formation. Once someone tried to barge into the central region, the powerhouses of the Star Lord's palace would know immediately. There were a total of 4 entrances to enter the central region: north, south, east, and west. Xiao Chun and the others entered from the east entrance. With the identity of the Emperor Dong's palace's ruler, Xiao Chun and the others naturally entered the central region without any obstructions. After all, the Emperor Dong's palace was equivalent to an external force of the Star Lord's palace. It was an official existence. Naturally, no one would stop Xiao Chun and the others. Phew, the spirit chi in the central region is much denser, and this is only the periphery. Yes, the spirit chi in the starry sky is already so dense. I wonder how dense the spirit chi in the many continents in the central region is. On the deck, Long Qing, Lin Yuan, and the others said with a smile. Under normal circumstances, the spirit chi in the starry sky was very thin. Only after entering a continent would the spirit chi become denser. However, in the starry sky of the central region, the density of the spirit chi was not low. This was the difference between the central region and the other 4 regions. With such a density of spirit chi, it was no wonder that the number of powerhouses in the central region far exceeded that of the other 4 regions. A good cultivation environment would naturally be able to nurture experts better. Moreover, it was said that the development of martial arts in the central region was obviously better than that of the other 4 regions. Otherwise, Xiao Chun and the others would not have come all the way here to find an opportunity to break through to become rulers. In the cabin, Xiao Chun and Lin Yun sat opposite each other, drinking and chatting. "Brother Xiao Chun, now that we've entered the central region, where are we going next?" This time, they came to find an opportunity to break through to become rulers, so they naturally could not run around like headless flies. In response, Xiao Chun smiled. "Before we left, the old man said that the most direct way is to go to the Star Lord's Hall. However, the method to break through to become a ruler in the Star Lord's Hall isn't available at any time. It's said that there are other conditions." "That's true, but I reckon that we can't not go to the Star Lord's Hall." "Of course. We'll definitely go to the Star Lord's Hall, but the old man also mentioned a few other places and asked us to go there when we have time." Before Xiao Chun and the others left, old Dongwang had given them a lot of instructions. Of course, it was about the places in the central region that were worth Xiao Chun and the others going to. These places were all very famous in the central region, and each of them was related to breaking through to become a ruler. There was no guarantee that one could break through to become a ruler, and the chances were very slim, but without exception, these places were all helpful to breaking through to become a ruler. Therefore, Xiao Chun and the others had to go to these treasured places. The more places they went, the more hope they had. In addition to the reward from the space-slaying beast, Xiao Chun and the others were not far from breaking through to become rulers. They just did not know when this opportunity would come. Perhaps one day, they would suddenly have an opportunity and be able to break through to become a ruler. Of course, other than introducing these treasured places, old Dongwang also reminded Xiao Chun and the others that it was better to keep a low profile in the central region. After all, there were many noble clans in the central region, and it was far from what the eastern region could compare to. Moreover, some powerful forces were not afraid of the Emperor Dong's palace at all, so they could only act in the central region and not be too arrogant. This was because one did not know what kind of background the people one offended in the central region had. Perhaps there was a ruler behind them? Please collect, monthly vote recommend. Chapter 3265. Compared to the other four regions, the situation in the central region was obviously much more complicated. This was because the number of rulers in the central region was far from what the other four regions could compare to. It was true that all the rulers in the central region belonged to the Star Lord's palace, but there was a big difference. These rulers were mainly divided into two camps. One was a lone wolf without any complicated background. Such rulers were only loyal to the Star Lord's palace and held real power in the Star Lord's palace. The other group, such as the two rulers of the Feng people, also belonged to the Star Lord's palace in name, but in reality, they were only there in name. They did not hold any important positions, and they did not even have any relationship with the Star Lord's palace. Only during special times would they appear in the Star Lord's palace. Other than the Star Lord's palace, the various major forces in the central region were even more intertwined. To be honest, the Star Lord's palace's control over the central region might not be as strong as Emperor Dong's palace's control over the eastern region. This did not mean that the Star Lord's palace was not strong, but the central region's situation was very special. After all, as the center of the Fire Phoenix galaxy, almost all the major forces in the central region had extremely long legacies. With a deep foundation and complicated relationships, a delicate balance had long been formed after so many years. Even the Star Lord's palace did not want to break this balance because once it was broken, it would be very troublesome. Along the way, Xiao Chun and the others did not encounter any interstellar pirate. After all, the people of the central region did not care about such things at all. Soon, they arrived at an unknown continent. It was huge and extremely prosperous. Before they entered, they could see spatial spirit boats and starships coming and going in an endless stream. This was the central region. Its population exceeded the total of the other four regions. Countless people wanted to take root in the central region. As for the reason, it was very simple. It was because the central region was easier for them to become stronger and had more opportunities. 10 Directions Continent? Isn't that where the Emperor Extremity Mountain is? This continent was called the 10 Directions Continent. Putting away the spatial spirit boat, the group found a small city at random. Lin Yun said softly. The Emperor Extremity Mountain was a treasure land that the old man Dongwang had specially mentioned. It was also a place where one could break through to become a ruler. He asked Xiao Chun and Lin Yun to go there. Xiao Chun and Lin Yun naturally remembered the treasured land that Dongwang had specially mentioned. He didn't expect his luck to be so good. The random continent he found turned out to be the 10 Directions Continent. Hearing this, Xiao Chen nodded with a smile and said, "That's right. Since we're here, we should go to the Emperor Extremity Mountain to have a look." Since he was already here, he would definitely go to the Emperor Extremity Mountain. After all, this was an opportunity to break through to become a ruler. However, it shouldn't be easy to enter the Emperor Extremity Mountain. These treasures are either in the hands of the Star Lord's palace or in the hands of those powerful forces. It doesn't matter. Let's pay a visit first. A treasured land like the Emperor Extremity Mountain naturally couldn't be entered casually. Moreover, in the central region, although Xiao Chen and the others were very strong, they were no longer invincible. Under normal circumstances, the forces that controlled the treasured land of the Emperor Extremity Mountain would have a ruler overseeing it. After all, without a ruler overseeing it personally, it was impossible to control such a treasured land. Therefore, in the central region, Xiao Chen and the others naturally couldn't act as unscrupulously as they did in the scattered Star Sea. "Let's pay a visit first," Xiao Chen and Lin Yun discussed. However, while the two were discussing, a conversation at the next table instantly aroused the interest of Xiao Chen and the others. It's said that the opening of the Emperor Extremity Mountain this time has attracted a lot of people. That's for sure. After all, it's the Emperor Extremity Mountain, a place that many battle ancestor realm kings dream of. That's right. If one is lucky enough to enter and cultivate, the chances of breaking through to the Emperor realm will be higher. Even so, it's not that easy. Every time the Emperor Extremity Mountain opens, there are only a total of 20 spots. 10 of them are occupied by the Extreme Path Palace, and the other 10 can only be obtained through competition. Every time the Emperor Extremity Mountain opens, there will be a fierce battle. Many battle ancestor realm kings will fight for the remaining 10 spots. If one's strength isn't enough, then don't even think about it. The Extreme Path Palace was the huge sect that controlled the Emperor Extremity Mountain, and it was also the absolute overlord of the 10 Directions continent. It was said that the history of the Extreme Path Palace was comparable to the Feng people, but in terms of strength it was inferior to the Feng people. Of course, even so, the Extreme Path Palace's strength was enough to stand shoulder to shoulder with the Eastern Emperor Palace. That was because the Extreme Path Palace had an Emperor Realm King overseeing it. Hearing this, Xiao Chen and Lin Yun looked at each other. They didn't expect their luck to be so good. They actually managed to catch the opening of the Emperor Extremity Mountain. In this way, the possibility of entering the Emperor Extremity Mountain was much higher. As for the so-called competition, Xiao Chen and Lin Yun weren't worried at all. At the Battle Ancestor realm, Xiao Chen and Lin Yun had absolute confidence in their strength. They didn't dare to say that they were invincible, but they were definitely in the top group of people. Even in the central region, there weren't many Battle Ancestor realm kings that could be compared to the two of them. Thinking of this, Xiao Chen took the initiative to stand up and go to the next table. He asked the few people with a smile, "Fellow Taoists, I wonder if you can tell me more about the opening of the Emperor Extremity Mountain?" Facing the sudden arrival of Xiao Chen, the few people were stunned at first, but they soon started talking enthusiastically. Although these people had been talking about the Emperor Extremity Mountain, they had no intention of entering the Emperor Extremity Mountain at all. The reason was very simple. It was because these people's cultivation wasn't enough. Among them, the highest cultivation was only at the Ancient Era's level. They hadn't even reached the Divine Ancestor realm. With such cultivation, they naturally couldn't enter the Emperor Extremity Mountain. Even if they entered, it would be useless, and Xiao Chen was obviously a Battle Ancestor realm king. Therefore, they naturally didn't dare to offend him. Actually, these few people's information about the Emperor Extremity Mountain was also all hearsay. However, they still knew the general time. After all, it wasn't a secret. No one would hide it. From these people, they found out that the opening of the Emperor Extremity Mountain would take place a month later. Because of the competition, there would be a spot battle in 5 days. As for the location, it would naturally be in the Extreme Path Palace. The experts of the Extreme Path Palace would be the judges to decide the ownership of the remaining 10 spots. Therefore, if Shao Chun and the others wanted to enter the Emperor Extremity Mountain, they would have to rush to the Extreme Path Palace within 5 days. Otherwise, they would have to wait for the next time. After chatting with a few people, Shao Chun roughly understood some information about the Emperor Extremity Mountain and the Extreme Path Palace. Seeking collection, seeking monthly votes, seeking recommendation. Chapter 3266. Rushing to the Extreme Path Palace in 5 days wasn't too urgent. With Shao Chen's group speed, they could arrive in 1 day. Our luck isn't bad. Let's rest for a night and head to the Extreme Path Palace tomorrow. After leaving the restaurant, Shao Chen spoke. No one had any objections to this. In truth, the Emperor Extremity Mountain didn't have much of an attraction for Long Qing, Lin Yuan, and the others because they couldn't enter. Only Battle Ancestor Realm experts had the qualifications to enter the Emperor Extremity Mountain. Without reaching the Battle Ancestor Realm, even if one entered the Emperor Extremity Mountain, it was hard to gain anything. Without reaching the Battle Ancestor Realm, one couldn't touch anything related to the Emperor Realm. It was the same logic as learning how to run if one didn't even know how to walk. After a silent night, the group rushed to the Extreme Path Palace early the next morning. Along the way, they saw many people rushing in the direction of the Extreme Path Palace. Among these people, the majority of them had yet to reach the Battle Ancestor Realm, and only a few of them had reached the Saint Ancestor Realm. However, the opening of the Emperor Extremity Mountain was a major event on the 10 Directions continent. Moreover, these people didn't have the qualifications to enter the Emperor Extremity Mountain, but that didn't mean they weren't interested in the battle between Battle Ancestor Realm experts. Being able to watch a battle between Battle Ancestor Realm experts was a rare opportunity for many ordinary cultivators. Therefore, every time the Emperor Extremity Mountain opened, it would attract many people to watch the battle. The Extreme Path Palace had never stopped these people. As long as these people didn't do anything unnecessary, the Extreme Path Palace wouldn't pay too much attention to them. Soon, they arrived at the Extreme Path Palace. As a famous force in the central region, with an Emperor Realm expert overseeing it, the Extreme Path Palace's location was indeed magnificent. Other than the buildings that resembled immortals' pavilions and the beautiful scenery, the most memorable thing was the feeling the Extreme Path Palace gave off. Those exquisite buildings didn't have the slightest trace of worldly aura. How should one put it? The Extreme Path Palace in front of them seemed to be formed by nature. Every building, every blade of grass, and every tree seemed to be a gift from the heavens. When put together, there was no sense of disharmony. This was one of the central region's major forces. In terms of heritage, it wasn't any worse than the Eastern Imperial Palace. After all, the 4 major palaces like Emperor Dong's palace were built under the command of the Star Lord. In terms of history, they were probably not as long as the Supreme Palace. He didn't see any protective array, but there shouldn't be many people in the central region who would dare to cause trouble in the Extreme Path Palace. This was the foundation and momentum of a great force. Even without the protection of the formation, no one would dare to cause trouble here. Most of the people were stopped outside the Extreme Path Palace. Their cultivation levels were not high enough, so they did not even have the qualifications to enter the palace. They could only wait for the battle to begin and be a spectator. Without wasting any time, Shao Chen's group quickly arrived at the mountain gate of Extreme Path Palace. At the mountain gate, there were over 100 Extreme Path Palace disciples in charge of receiving guests. The leader was an Extreme Path Palace elder with a divine ancestor cultivation base. Allowing a Saint Ancestor Realm elder to welcome a Battle Ancestor Realm king, this was the benefit of being in a large force. Originally, when Holy Ancestor Realm powerhouses faced Battle Ancestor Realm kings, they had to be respectful. However, because this elder was a member of the Extreme Path Palace and had the backing of the Extreme Path Palace, even when facing a Battle Ancestor Realm king, he still had a calm expression and didn't have the slightest bit of respect. On the contrary, the Battle Ancestor Realm king was very polite. Just like the Battle Ancestor Realm king before, Xiao Chen's group arrived at the mountain gate. The Extreme Path Palace elder glanced at Xiao Chen and Lin Yun indifferently and then said indifferently, "Name, identity." Xiao Chen and Lin Yun didn't pay much attention to the Extreme Path Palace's request. After all, this was their territory. Moreover, the Emperor Extremity Mountain belonged to the Extreme Path Palace, so there was nothing wrong with asking them to register. Soon, they finished registering their basic information. When the elder saw that Xiao Chen's group was from the eastern region, a mocking expression appeared on his face. It was obvious that he looked down on the people of the eastern region. This was actually very common in the central region. The martialists of the central region had always thought that they were the true rulers of the Fire Phoenix galaxy. The people of the central region looked down on the martialists of the other four regions, including the eastern region and the scattered Star Ocean. They thought that it was just a barbarian land, and the martialists there were simply a group of country bumpkins who didn't understand the true meaning of martial arts. Faced with such a change, Xiao Chen and Lin Yun were naturally unhappy. Even if they had the backing of the Extreme Path Palace, they were still just Divine Ancestor Realm cultivators. A Divine Ancestor Realm martialist actually dared to look down on a Battle Ancestor Realm king. If it was any other place, it would be courting death. Not wanting to cause trouble, Xiao Chen and Lin Yun didn't say anything. They just stood there quietly without saying a word. After everything was settled, the elder said to a disciple beside him, "Take them to the back mountain and wait for the quota battle to begin." Hearing this, the disciple was stunned at first, then he smiled and nodded. Xiao Chen didn't know that the back mountain wasn't a place to entertain Battle Ancestor Realm kings. The many Battle Ancestor Realm kings who came to the Extreme Path Palace were all arranged to special guest rooms. However, because Xiao Chen and the others weren't from the central region, they were from the eastern region, so the elder directly arranged for them to stay in the back mountain. Along the way to the back mountain, they didn't see a single person. In front of a simple thatched hut, the disciple in charge of leading the way said with a sneer, "Yes, you will stay here. When the quota battle begins, someone will come to inform you." Perhaps it was because of the influence of the elder, but when facing Xiao Chen and the others, the disciple still had an overbearing look. He was just a junior, and an ordinary disciple of the Extreme Path Palace. His cultivation was as low as an ant, but he dared to speak to Xiao Chen like that. Not to mention Xiao Chen and Lin Yun, even Long Qing and Lin Yuan couldn't bear it. "Kid, what did you say?" Lin Hu, who had the most violent temper, shouted angrily. His aura instantly exploded and enveloped the disciple. Under Lin Hu's pressure, the disciple's face instantly turned pale. With his cultivation, he couldn't even resist Lin Hu's aura. This was because Lin Hu didn't kill him. Otherwise, his aura alone would have crushed the disciple to death. However, what no one expected was that under Lin Hu's pressure, the disciple didn't learn his lesson. Instead, he was completely enraged. He clenched his teeth and shouted with a face full of anger, "What do you want? This is the Extreme Path Palace. You dare to fight in the Extreme Path Palace? Do you want to die? Begging for collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendation." Chapter 3267. A mere ordinary disciple didn't have the slightest bit of respect when facing a Battle Ancestor Realm king. He even dared to speak rudely. This was naturally because Xiao Chen and the others were from the eastern region. If Shao Chun and the others were Battle Ancestor Realm Kings from the Central Region, the situation would be completely different, Lin Yun said expressionlessly as she looked coldly at the disciple. Ahoo, stop. Hearing Lin Yun's words, although Lin Hu was still unable to restrain his anger, he slowly retracted his aura. Lin Yun's thoughts were simple. She didn't want to cause trouble in the Extreme Path Palace. Unfortunately, in the face of Lin Yun's forbearance, the disciple thought that he was afraid. When he thought of how a Battle Ancestor Realm King would swallow his anger in front of him, the disciple's ego swelled to the extreme. There was a saying that if you want to destroy someone, you must first make them crazy. The disciple before him was like that. He had never been so proud before. Look, just because I'm a disciple of the Extreme Path Palace, even a Battle Ancestor Realm King would have to give me some face. The smile on his face became even more arrogant. Looking at the disciple's smug expression, Lin Hu, Lin Yuan and the others wanted nothing more than to chop him into pieces. If it wasn't for Lin Yun's words, they would have already killed him. Did he really think that they were afraid of the Extreme Path Palace? What a joke. They were only following Lin Yun's orders. Unlike Lin Yuan and the others, Lin Yun and Shao Chen's expressions were calm. It wasn't worth it to get angry over such an ant. Ignoring the disciple, Shao Chen and Lin Hu were about to walk into the wooden house. However, at that moment, the disciple still spoke recklessly. Bah, what a bunch of barbarians! Why did such a person come to our central region? I wonder what kind of parents would give birth to such a country bumpkin. Shao Chen instantly stopped and turned to look at the disciple. Facing Shao Chen's gaze, the disciple's heart tightened. After all, this was a Battle Ancestor Realm King. However, after thinking about it, the disciple became unyielding. He was a disciple of the Extreme Path Palace. What was there to be afraid of? Would these country bumpkins from the eastern region dare to kill someone in the Extreme Path Palace? What a joke. Thinking of this, the disciple forced himself to stick out his chest and pretended to be fearless as he shouted. What, you want to kill me? Do you dare? I'm a disciple of the Extreme Path Palace. Shao Chen looked at the disciple with pity after hearing what he said. He wondered what it meant to be naive and reckless. Initially, he wanted to kill this disciple with a casual blow. However, since he was going to kill this disciple anyway, he might as well settle the matter once and for all, including that elder. The disciples of the Extreme Path Palace sex elders, Lins of the Extreme Path Palace of the Extreme Path Palace Palace of the Extreme Path Palace. To humiliate them to T2s of them to the battle ancestor, not from them, s groups' ancestor to them's palaces of the to them. Originally, he thought that it would be better to avoid unnecessary trouble. Unfortunately, there were some people who refused to shed tears until they saw the coffin. Do you really think that the Extreme Path Palace will protect you? Said Lin Yun of the Extreme Path Palace calmly to the disciple. He didn't show the slightest bit of anger. In Shao Chen's opinion, the disciple was already a dead man. There was no point in getting angry at a dead man. Before he died, Shao Chen wanted to tell him that the Extreme Path Palace couldn't protect him. In other words, the Extreme Path Palace wouldn't protect him at all. However, the disciple still didn't understand. Even after hearing Shao Chen's words, he still had a proud look on his face. What, do you think you can contend against the Extreme Path Palace with just the few of you? Wishful thinking. Forget it, I'll let you see for yourself. After saying that, Shao Chen's body suddenly emitted a powerful aura. At this moment, Shao Chen didn't suppress his aura anymore. Instead, he unleashed his full power. In an instant, the terrifying aura of a Battle Ancestor Realm King shrouded the entire Extreme Path Palace. Since he was going to kill them, Shao Chen wanted to kill the disciple and the elder in front of the upper echelons of the Extreme Path Palace. He wanted to show them that even a Battle Ancestor Realm King from the East region was still a king. A king couldn't be humiliated. This wasn't a joke. As Xiao Chen's aura erupted, the disciple was stunned. Soon, from the depths of the Extreme Path Palace, a few other terrifying auras also soared into the sky. Then, a few figures appeared out of thin air. There were a total of 3 people. Without exception, they were all Battle Ancestor Realm Kings. They were the true upper echelons of the Extreme Path Palace. The elder from before couldn't be compared to them. When the 3 of them appeared, they didn't seem aggressive at all. Instead, they cupped their hands and spoke politely. "My friend, fighting is prohibited in the Extreme Path Palace. What happened? You can tell us. There's no need for this." The 3 of them were polite to Xiao Chen because of Xiao Chen's aura. Since he didn't hold back and they were all Battle Ancestor Realm Kings, the 3 of them could clearly sense that Xiao Chen's cultivation was at the peak of the Battle Ancestor Realm. He even seemed to have touched the threshold of the Sovereign Realm. Such a cultivation base could be said to be invincible among Battle Ancestor Realm Kings. Therefore, they naturally didn't want to offend such a powerhouse. Of course, the main reason was that there was no need to do so. If they offended someone like Xiao Chen because of a small matter, they would only do so if there was something wrong with their head. Most of the time, the more powerful a person was, the more polite they would be. When they interacted with others, they would give off a refreshing feeling. On the contrary, the weaker the person, the more arrogant they were, It was as if no one in this world was worthy of their attention. Wasn't the 3 upper echelons of the Extreme Path Palace a stark contrast to the elder and the disciple from before? Before Xiao Chen could answer, the disciple next to him spoke first after hearing what the 3 of them said. Disciple greets Supreme Elder. This person doesn't respect the Extreme Path Palace and wants to kill me here. Supreme Elder, please uphold justice. Good heavens! The guilty party was complaining first. Before Xiao Chen could speak, the disciple had already made the accusation. However, Xiao Chen wasn't anxious at all. He only watched the disciple's praise quietly. On the other hand, the 3 of them. After hearing these words, one of the old men frowned slightly. He looked at this disciple with some displeasure and said, "Impudent! You have no right to speak here. Stand aside." With a glance, he could tell that the disciple was just an ordinary disciple. There were 5 Battle Ancestor Realm Kings present. How could an ordinary disciple like him interrupt a conversation between Battle Ancestor Realm Kings? He didn't know the rules. Begging for collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations. Chapter 3268. After being reprimanded by the old man, the disciple naturally didn't dare to say a word. He gradually felt that something was wrong. The Supreme Elder didn't ask anything else and directly reprimanded him. In an instant, the disciple's expression changed. Xiao Chen only glanced at him indifferently. At this time, another Supreme Elder of the Extreme Path Palace spoke. "Fellow Taoist, I don't know what happened. What this disciple said just now, although he didn't say it clearly, the meaning was obvious. Did Xiao Chen really want to kill someone in the Extreme Path Palace? Moreover, the person he wanted to kill was a disciple of the Extreme Path Palace." Faced with the questioning, Xiao Chen nodded and admitted without hesitation. "That's right. I want to kill this kid." Seeing Xiao Chen nod so straightforwardly, the 3 Supreme Elders were dumbfounded. What was going on? However, since he dared to kill someone in the Extreme Path Palace, he obviously didn't give the Extreme Path Palace any face. Even a combat ancestor realm king couldn't be so presumptuous. In an instant, the 3 Supreme Elders' faces turned gloomy, and their tone became unfriendly. "Fellow Taoist, are you joking with us?" "No, that's the truth." "Heh, then does that mean that fellow Taoist doesn't put our Extreme Path Palace in his eyes? I've always been a person who respects others tenfold. Since the Extreme Path Palace has such an attitude, I can only do the same." Facing the 3 Supreme Elders' questioning, Xiao Chen didn't panic at all. Hearing this, the three supreme elders looked at each other, and a trace of doubt flashed in their eyes. There must be some secret behind this. Moreover, why did this group of people come to the back mountain? Because the Emperor Extremity Mountain was about to open, many combat ancestor realm kings were rushing to the Extreme Path Palace. However, this wasn't the place to entertain a group of combat ancestor realm kings. What kind of joke was this? As the overlord of the 10 Directions continent, the Extreme Path Palace was a famous force in the central region. Naturally, they would want to maintain their reputation. Moreover, they were entertaining combat ancestor realm kings. Naturally, they had to bring out the highest standards. They couldn't possibly arrange for so many kings to stay in the back mountain. As the Extreme Path Palace's higher-ups, the three supreme elders weren't fools. They quickly guessed something and looked at Xiao Chen suspiciously. Fellow Taoist, there's no need to ask me. Just ask your own disciples. I only have one thing to say. Today I'm going to kill, not only this disciple, but also the elder in charge of receiving us. Xiao Chen said bluntly. Moreover, he had directly threatened to kill. Moreover, he had said this to the three supreme elders of the Extreme Path Palace. However, to that disciple's surprise, the three utmost exalted elders did not berate Xiao Chen after hearing his words. Instead, they grew silent. What was going on? Wouldn't the three grand elders stop him from killing people in the Supreme Path Palace? Stupid! What was even more unexpected to this disciple was that after the three grand elders exhorted him for a moment, they actually turned around and scolded him. Not only did he not blame Xiao Chen, but he also pointed the spearhead at himself. Actually, with the eyesight of the three of them, they had already guessed what had happened. This was disrespect to the king of the War Ancestor realm. You are simply an idiot. No matter what the reason is, you, a mere ordinary elder and an ordinary disciple, actually dared to be disrespectful to the War Ancestor realm king. That was simply the biggest joke in the world. Even the Supreme Path Palace was not willing to provoke a War Ancestor realm king. The price of provoking a War Ancestor realm king was definitely not small. Although the Supreme Path Palace was not afraid of a direct confrontation with a War Ancestor realm king, what if there was a War Ancestor realm king secretly watching the Supreme Path Palace? What if a War Ancestor realm king ambushed them from time to time, or assassinated their disciples? Wouldn't they, the Supreme Elders, have to protect their disciples at all times? Moreover, although the Supreme Path Palace had an emperor, what kind of person was an emperor? They would not easily make a move. Because of this, unless it was absolutely necessary, the Supreme Path Palace would not provoke a War Ancestor realm king. Most of the time, both sides would treat each other with respect. In fact, in order to gain the favor of a War Ancestor realm king, the Supreme Path Palace did not hesitate to give out the same amount of quotas as the Emperor Extremity Mountain to many War Ancestor realm kings. Did the Supreme Path Palace not want to monopolize the Emperor Extremity Mountain? Of course not. The reason was that they could not. Glaring fiercely at that disciple, one of them shouted coldly, "Who is the elder in charge of receiving us today? Tell him to get his ass over here immediately." Soon, the elder in charge of receiving Xiao Chen and the others rushed over. He seemed to already know what had happened, so when he saw Xiao Chen and the three supreme elders, he did not panic at all. On the contrary, he had a calm expression as he bowed respectfully. "Greetings, Supreme Elder." Seeing this elder, the expressions of the three supreme elders changed. They were somewhat unsightly and somewhat helpless. How could it be him? They all thought so in their hearts. The three supreme elders' intentions were actually very simple at the beginning. This elder and disciple dared to be disrespectful to a War Ancestor realm king. They indeed deserved to die. They just needed to find a reason to kill them. Chapter 3269. Killing an ordinary disciple was obviously not enough to appease Xiao Chen's anger. The elder had to die as well. It could be seen that the elder had a backer. Otherwise, the three supreme elders wouldn't be so biased towards him. But so what? Xiao Chen believed that as long as the Extreme Path Palace wasn't stupid, they would know what to do. It wasn't difficult to choose between offending the two peak kings of the War Ancestor realm and the Emperor Dong's palace behind them or killing them. However, after hearing Xiao Chen's words, the first elder sneered before the three supreme elders could reply. Kill me? Heh, I already said that you guys from the East region are country bumpkins. Try killing me if you can. As he spoke, he took a few steps forward as if he was waiting for Xiao Chen to make a move. Seeing the elder's arrogance, Long Qing, Lin Yuan, and the others were furious. The three supreme elders also frowned. How could the grandson of the supreme elder be so ungrateful? Even at this time, he still didn't know how to restrain himself. Let's contact the supreme elder first. The three supreme elders didn't like the elder, but they still had to protect him. After all, he was the grandson of the supreme elder. At the same time, Xiao Chen said indifferently after hearing the elder's words. Killing you will dirty my hands. Don't worry, someone will do it. I don't need to do it. Xiao Chen turned to look at the three supreme elders as soon as he finished speaking and spoke plainly. My request is simple. Your Extreme Path Palace will kill these two. After all, a king cannot be humiliated. If you can do it, this matter will be over. Killing the ordinary disciple wasn't a problem at all, but the trouble was with the elder. Hearing that, the white-haired elder said after a moment of silence. We can kill this disciple immediately, but he is the grandson of the supreme elder of our Extreme Path Palace. Although he didn't say it directly, his meaning was obvious. It was impossible to kill the elder because he had a backer. As soon as he said that, a disdainful smile appeared on the elder's face. Look, this is a country bumpkin from the eastern region. What can he do to me? At the same time, a figure appeared on the field again. Seeing this figure, the elder hurriedly called out. Grandpa. Yes. The elder nodded slightly. He was the first supreme elder of the Extreme Path Palace. He was at the peak of the Warring Ancestor realm and was the third strongest person in the Extreme Path Palace. His strength was second only to the Palace Master and the Ancestor. He nodded slightly at his grandson and then looked at Xiao Chen and Lin Yun. Seeing that the two of them were not any weaker than him, the first supreme elder said indifferently. My Extreme Path Palace is willing to compensate for this matter. Why don't the two of you just let it go? He already knew the ins and outs of the matter. It was indeed the Extreme Path Palace's fault. However, even so, it was impossible for him to kill his own grandson. However, Xiao Chen chuckled when he heard what Yi Futian said. To be honest, Xiao Chen was not interested in the compensation offered by the Extreme Path Palace. What good things could they offer? Shaking his head, Xiao Chen insisted. There is no need for compensation. I have already made my request very clear. What if I don't agree? Seeing Xiao Chen's firm attitude, the first supreme elder sneered. This was the Extreme Path Palace. Although Xiao Chen and Lin Yun were not weak, it was impossible for them to force the first supreme elder to kill his own grandson. Seeing the first supreme elder's resolute expression, he was determined to protect his grandson. Xiao Chen's expression did not change as he said indifferently. If you don't kill them, I will declare war on the Extreme Path Palace. I would like to see what choice the Extreme Path Palace will make for an ordinary disciple and an ordinary elder. Declare war? With just the two of you? As soon as Xiao Chen said that, not only the first supreme elder, but also the other three supreme elders' expressions changed. They all thought that Xiao Chen was too arrogant. They admitted that Xiao Chen and Lin Yun were very strong, but even so, they could not be mentioned on equal terms with the Extreme Path Palace. Nevertheless, under everyone's gazes, Xiao Chun still nodded calmly. Of course, it's not just the two of us. As Xiao Chun spoke, he took out a spirit tablet. This spirit tablet was given to him by old Dong Huang, and there were a total of 3 of them. Once activated, it could condense an illusory image of old Dong Huang. For 15 minutes, it could help Xiao Chen and the others fight. Its combat power was naturally at the level of a ruler. This was also for Xiao Chen and the others to be safer when they encountered danger. Seeing Xiao Chen take out the spirit tablets, the first Supreme Elder and the others were stunned. Then, Xiao Chen said unhurriedly, "If you don't agree, I'll activate the spirit tablet." As he spoke, Xiao Chen injected a trace of spiritual qi into the spirit tablet. Instantly, the aura of a ruler spread out. The spirit tablet had not been fully activated, but it was not difficult to determine from this aura that the owner of the spirit tablet was a ruler. For a moment, the expressions of the first Supreme Elder and the others changed. An emperor. Even the Extreme Path Palace only had one emperor. If they offended a war ancestor realm king, the Extreme Path Palace wouldn't care too much. However, offending an emperor was a completely different matter. Naturally, they knew what the spirit tablet was for. Although it was not the true body of a ruler, once it was activated, it could possess the power of the ruler's body for 15 minutes. Chapter 3270. The Extreme Path Palace's palace master agreed to Xiao Chen's request. To him, he did not care about their lives at all. Compared to offending a ruler, losing an ordinary disciple and an ordinary elder was nothing. Therefore, there was no need to hesitate at all. Nevertheless, the first Supreme Elder panicked when he heard that. He hurriedly looked at the palace master. Palace master, they were his grandson. How could the first Supreme Elder bear to watch his grandson be killed just like that? Without giving the first Supreme Elder a chance to speak, the palace master waved his hand and interrupted him. It's settled then. They could only blame themselves for not knowing who they could offend and who they could not. Hearing the palace master's words, the disciple and the elder were dumbfounded. They did not expect things to turn out this way. In the end, the sect could not protect them. In actuality, the two of them did not understand the principle of value at all. Everything was valued. The two of them were nothing to the Extreme Path Palace, so it was impossible for the palace to offend a ruler for them. Even if the elder was the first Supreme Elder's grandson, it was the same. It was not a problem for them to rely on the Extreme Path Palace to bully others. However, this time they had hit an iron plate, so they could not blame anyone. The palace master did not care about the first Supreme Elder's objection at all. He immediately killed the two of them. They did not even have the time to beg for mercy. Seeing his grandson die, the first Supreme Elder's face turned ghastly. "I wonder if you're satisfied with this result?" As he spoke, the palace master's tone was not very good. After all, this matter had caused the Extreme Path Palace to lose face. Although the Extreme Path Palace was in the wrong first, Xiao Chen's overbearing attitude was naturally displeasing. Xiao Chen naturally knew about this, but he did not care too much. He nodded slightly. "Of course, I'm satisfied. All right, I'll get someone to arrange a new place for you. However, I hope that you can abide by the Extreme Path Palace's rules." Before leaving, the palace master did not forget to remind Xiao Chen and the others. The warning in his words was self-evident. As the palace master left, the first Supreme Elder put away his grandson's corpse. He glared at Xiao Chen and the others fiercely and left without saying a word. As for the disciple, nobody cared about him at all. He was purely courting death. Perhaps before he died, he did not even think about why the sect gave up on him without hesitation. Soon, a new elder came to lead Xiao Chen and the others to another residence. The environment was obviously much better. This was the real place where the Extreme Path Palace's guests were received. This time, the elder did not dare to show any disrespect. Even the grandson of the first Supreme Elder had been killed. How could he dare to provoke Xiao Chen and the others? After respectfully settling Xiao Chen and the others down, the elder said courteously, "Thank you for your help. Seniors, feel free to look for me anytime." After saying that, he bid farewell and left. After such a small interlude, nobody took it to heart. However, Lin Yun teased them. "I'm afraid the first Supreme Elder hates us now." There was no doubt about that. The first Supreme Elder naturally hated Xiao Chen and the others after seeing his grandson get killed with his own eyes. Even though Xiao Chen and the others weren't the ones who had attacked, so what? The first Supreme Elder would only blame everything on Xiao Chen and the others. Offending the first Supreme Elder in the Extreme Path Palace wasn't good news. However, Xiao Chen replied nonchalantly, "It's fine. I believe that the Extreme Path Palace won't make any unwise decisions. As long as they did not cross the bottom line of the Extreme Path Palace, both parties would be able to coexist peacefully." Furthermore, Xiao Chen had no intention of initiating trouble. Those two people had been too ungrateful, so they couldn't blame anyone else. After Xiao Chen and the others had settled down, the first Supreme Elder had a gloomy expression on his face. Beside him sat a young man. The young man was also a Supreme Elder of the Extreme Path Palace, and belonged to the first Supreme Elder's faction. The young man smiled bitterly as he faced the first Supreme Elder, who had an ugly expression on his face. "The Palace Master has already said that this matter will end here. No one is allowed to cause any more trouble." Knowing the first Supreme Elder's character, the Palace Master had already specially instructed him. In response, the first Supreme Elder snorted coldly. "Humph! Are we just going to let it end like this? Did you find out the identities of those people?" "Yes. They came from Emperor Dong's palace in the East region." Given the Extreme Path Palace's ability, it wasn't difficult to find out the origins of Xiao Chen and the others. In addition, Xiao Chen and the others didn't deliberately hide anything. Naturally, they were quickly found out. Hearing the young man's words, the first Supreme Elder's expression became gloomier. Emperor Dong's palace, a faction that was established much later than the Extreme Path Palace, dared to be so arrogant. If it weren't for the palace of the Star Lord, the first Supreme Elder wouldn't even care about Emperor Dong's palace. However, the Palace Master had already personally said that they shouldn't cause any more trouble. The first Supreme Elder couldn't directly attack Xiao Chen and the others. However, his own grandson had died. He couldn't just let it go. He couldn't take it lying down. He sat in his seat without saying a word. However, anyone could feel the murderous intent in his eyes. The young man at the side saw the first Supreme Elder's expression and maintained a faint smile. In his opinion, Xiao Chen and the others couldn't be blamed. It was the first Supreme Elder's grandson who had dug his own grave. Of course, he wouldn't plead for Xiao Chen and the others. After all, this had nothing to do with him. After a moment of silence, the first Supreme Elder finally spoke coldly. "The quota battle is about to begin. I remember that there should be many people who signed up this time, right? Are you thinking of?" "That's right. Since the Palace Master doesn't want us to attack, the others should be able to. It's normal for there to be casualties during the quota battle. Although that's the case, the two of them aren't weak. There aren't many kings in the Combat Ancestor realm who can match up to them, let alone win." In response, the young man replied indifferently. It was a good idea to take revenge during the quota battle. However, it was difficult to realize. After all, Xiao Chen and Lin Yun's strength was there for all to see. They weren't easy opponents. In the young man's opinion, there was probably no one who could defeat Xiao Chen and Lin Yun among the kings who were participating in the quota battle. Therefore, this idea was almost impossible. To put it bluntly, even if the first Supreme Elder personally attacked, he wouldn't dare to say that he could defeat Xiao Qin and Lin Yun. Please add vote recommend. Chapter 3271. It was simply unrealistic to take revenge during the quota battle. With the strength of those kings, it would be very difficult to deal with Xiao Qin and Lin Yun. He knew what the young man meant, but the first Supreme Elder already had an idea. Since they were no match for them in a one-on-one fight, what about a group fight? With dozens of combat ancestor realm kings attacking together, would they not be able to deal with the two of them? Furthermore, he still had a trump card in his hand, so he was not afraid. However, the first Supreme Elder did not say what he was thinking. Instead, he waved his hand and let the young man leave. Men, call Zhao Guangming and Qian Yang over. As the first Supreme Elder of the Extreme Path Palace, he naturally had some face in the central region. He belonged to the group of people who were at the peak below the ruler realm. Zhao Guangming and Qian Yang were the two strongest people who came to participate in the quota battle this time. The first Supreme Elder obviously had something to arrange for the two of them to come over. Not knowing that the first Supreme Elder was still planning to take revenge, Xiao Qin and the others stayed in the Extreme Path Palace. In the next few days, no one came looking for trouble, and Xiao Qin and the others were happy to be free. After 3 days, the quota battle finally began. Under the lead of an elder, the group quickly arrived at the martial arts practice field of the Extreme Path Palace. This was a small world that existed alone, and the quota battle was held here. According to the previous rules, the quota battle was also conducted in the form of a challenge tournament. The top 10 people would be qualified to enter the Emperor Extremity Mountain. When Xiao Qin and the others arrived, many combat ancestor realm kings had already arrived. When they saw Xiao Qin and the others, it was unknown whether they were doing it intentionally or not, but they all looked at Xiao Qin and Lin Yun. Of course, they only glanced at them and quickly looked away. However, such an obvious action was naturally noticed by Xiao Qin and Lin Yun. Lin Yun said with a smile, "Do you think we're being targeted?" "Perhaps, but there's nothing we can do. We'll just have to deal with whatever comes our way. If they were being targeted, then it must be the Supreme Grand Elder. Aside from him, no one else would do such a thing." Moreover, Xiao Qin was 80% sure that the first Supreme Elder would not let the matter rest. After all, his grandson had died. Combined with his behavior that day, it was obvious that he was angry. Of course, Xiao Qin wasn't afraid of the Supreme Great Elder. If this wasn't the Extreme Path Palace, Xiao Qin was confident that he could kill this old thing. Even though everyone was at the peak of the War Ancestor realm, under the same cultivation, there were still strong and weak people. He calmly walked to the side of the crowd. Chapter 3272. When the slot battle officially began, the first Supreme Elder and the others all retreated to the side. What happened next was needless to say. Apart from Xiao Qin and Lin Yun, the rest of the combat ancestor realm kings all looked at the two of them at the same time. Under dozens of gazes, how could Xiao Qin and Lin Yun not know that they were being targeted? I was wondering why the rules were suddenly changed. So that's why. The rules of the slot battle that had been in use for God knows how many years had suddenly been changed this time. It turned out that they were being targeted. Hearing Lin Yun's words, Xiao Qin looked at the first Supreme Elder, who was not far away. Coincidentally, the first Supreme Elder's gaze was also looking in his direction. For a moment, the two of them looked at each other. The corners of the first Supreme Elder's mouth curled into a cold smile. It felt as if he was saying, "Let's see if you can survive this time." No matter how strong Xiao Qin and Lin Yun were, The first Supreme Elder did not believe that the two of them could deal with so many combat ancestor realm kings at the same time. Since he could not deal with them personally, the first Supreme Elder could only do this and pay a heavy price for it. However, when he thought about how he could personally witness Shao Chen and Lin Yun being killed here, the first Supreme Elder felt a little better. He would use the two of them to accompany his grandson in death. The other Supreme Elders of Extreme Path Palace beside the first Supreme Elder naturally understood what was going on. To be honest, some of them did not agree with the first Supreme Elder's actions. After all, the cause of this matter was his grandson courting death. With his status, how dare he humiliate the combat ancestor realm kings? He deserved to be killed. Moreover, this matter was personally decided by the palace master. However, everyone who knew the first Supreme Elder well knew that he was a vengeful person. Even if they tried to persuade him, it would be useless. Moreover, since things had already come to this, there was no point in saying all this now. They could only hope that things would not develop out of control. The matter should have ended there, but the first Supreme Elder had made it difficult to deal with. Sigh. While the Supreme Elders of the Supreme Path Palace were having different thoughts, the group of Battle Ancestor Realm Kings had surrounded Shao Chun and Lin Yun. One of the middle-aged men looked at Shao Chun and Lin Yun and said faintly. He seemed to have some prestige among the crowd. "We don't have any enmity between us, but I was asked to do so by someone else, so I can only offend you. It doesn't matter. However, think carefully before you act. It's not worth it to lose your life for such a small reason." Hearing this, Shao Chun said calmly. Right now, all of these people wanted to kill him, and Shao Chun had nothing to say about it. If these people wanted to die, then Shao Chun would satisfy them. Hearing Shao Chun's words, the middle-aged man was first stunned, then his face sank. Shameless boasting. I know that the two of you are not weak, but can you deal with so many of us at the same time? It was almost impossible for the two of them to fight against dozens of Battle Ancestor Realm Kings. Even if Shao Chun and Lin Yun were at the peak of the Battle Ancestor Realm, they could not do it. Unless they were sovereigns, no one in the Battle Ancestor Realm Kings could do it. Of course, but how do you know that there are only two of us? Shao Chun was not a brainless person. He knew that he was not a match for so many Battle Ancestor Realm Kings. However, this did not mean that Shao Chun could not deal with them. After all, Shao Chun and Lin Yun were not people without background. Shao Chun and Lin Yun relied on the Emperor Dong's palace. Originally, if the first Supreme Elder had been willing to stop, Shao Chun and Lin Yun would not have taken the initiative to cause trouble. However, this old thing did not believe in evil and insisted on avenging his grandson. If that was the case, then he could not blame others. Not far away, the first Supreme Elder's eyes flashed with a strange light when he heard Shao Chen's words. What was this guy trying to do? No matter how he looked at it, Shao Chun and Lin Yun were already dead. He could not think of any way to break out of this situation. Stubborn. Not thinking that Shao Chun and Lin Yun had any way to break out of this situation, the first Supreme Elder could only snort coldly, the killing intent in his eyes growing stronger. However, what the first Supreme Elder did not expect was that after he finished speaking, Shao Chun suddenly took out a formation plate from his interspatial ring. This formation plate was engraved with a teleportation formation, and it was personally engraved by the North Emperor. It was completely capable of teleporting the people of the Emperor Dong's palace here. This could be considered one of Shao Chen's trump cards. Some people did not know what Shao Chen was going to do. At the same time, Shao Chen looked at the first Supreme Elder again. This time, he did not hold back at all and shouted directly. Old thing, I'll give you one last chance. Do you want to continue and make things go out of control? I don't know what you're talking about. The slot battle has already begun. Stop talking nonsense. In response, the first Supreme Elder played dumb, indicating that he did not understand what Shao Chen was talking about. Hearing this, the coldness in Xiao Chen's eyes became even more intense. Very well, this old thing would not shed tears until he saw the coffin. Without any hesitation, he activated the formation plate. In an instant, a teleportation formation with a diameter of about 50 to 60 meters appeared in front of Xiao Chen. Seeing this teleportation formation, everyone present was stunned. The face of a heavenly elder from the Extreme Doctrine Palace instantly darkened. It's actually a teleportation formation? Oh no, this fella must have invited someone to help him in the battle. Looking at the grade of the teleportation formation, it can only be drawn by a ruler. Being able to become a Supreme Elder of the Extreme Doctrine Palace, he naturally had good eyesight. He could tell at a glance that the teleportation formation was extraordinary. Even the Extreme Doctrine Palace did not have many such teleportation formations. After all, there were only 3 formation masters who were rulers in the entire Fire Phoenix galaxy. 2 of them were in the central region, and the other was the North King of the North Imperial Palace. When they thought about how Xiao Chen had invited someone to help him in the battle, the nature of this matter was completely different. This could be considered a big battle. By then, the entire Extreme Doctrine Palace would probably be implicated. The situation seemed to be developing in an uncontrollable direction. This was obviously not what the Extreme Path Palace wanted to see. Furthermore, the reason for this was that such a huge battle had been caused by an ordinary elder and an ordinary disciple. This made it even more meaningless. Of course, the first Supreme Elder was also involved. If he had not insisted on taking revenge for his grandson, things would not have developed to this point. Immediately, 2 irascible Supreme Elders looked at the first Supreme Elder and shouted coldly. "Are you satisfied now? It's clearly over, but you just have to stir up the flames of war again. Are you really planning to sacrifice the entire Extreme Doctrine Palace for that good-for-nothing grandson of yours? Please collect, monthly vote recommend." End of chapter. Chapter 3273. Seeing that Xiao Chen had activated the teleportation formation, the Supreme Elders of the Extreme Doctrine Palace turned pale. After all, the situation before their eyes was no longer within their control. What kind of situation was this? Originally, the matter had already ended, but now, the first Supreme Elder had forcefully ignited the flames of war. That ordinary disciple and his grandson had dug their own graves. Since the palace master had already sentenced them to death, why did the first Supreme Elder have to make such an unnecessary move? The first Supreme Elder's face darkened as he faced the crowd's accusations. However, he still refused to admit defeat. What's there to be afraid of? Why would the Extreme Doctrine Palace be afraid of Emperor Dong's palace? The first Supreme Elder still did not have the slightest bit of regret. In his opinion, would Emperor Dong's palace really dare to start a war with the Extreme Doctrine Palace? Faced with the first Supreme Elder's words, the other Supreme Elders beside him were all filled with rage. This was not a matter of whether they were afraid or not. The Extreme Doctrine Palace was not afraid of Emperor Dong's palace, but was it worth it? To put it bluntly, things had developed to this point entirely because of the Supreme Elder's stubbornness. This was not worth it. If it was because of some conflict of interest or some other important reason, the Extreme Doctrine Palace would not be afraid of a war with Emperor Dong's palace. However, the reason for this war was actually because of an ordinary disciple and an ordinary elder. This was ridiculous. In the entire Extreme Doctrine Palace, there were at least 800 ordinary elders like the first Supreme Elder's grandson, if not 1,000. This kind of elder was nothing to the Extreme Path Palace. They could casually bring out a bunch of them. Hence, becoming enemies with Emperor Dong's palace over such a reason, or even starting a war with them, was not a wise choice. In the eyes of the crowd, the first Supreme Elder's actions were due to the hatred in his heart and his own selfish motives. He did not care about the interests of the Extreme Doctrine Palace at all. Just as the Supreme Elders were talking, far away in Emperor Dong's palace in the East region, a teleportation formation also appeared in front of the Emperor Dong's palace's main hall. Not long after, Zixian, Lai Wan and Old Man Dongwang appeared. Lai Wan smiled as he looked at the teleportation formation in front of them. This is Xiao Chen's teleportation formation, right? Are they in trouble? It should be. Otherwise, Xiao Chen wouldn't have activated the formation. Is someone from the central region provoking the Emperor Dong's palace? Interesting. Let's go and see what's going on. Yes. As they spoke, everyone strode into the teleportation array. Although there were only 9 War Ancestor Realm Kings in the Eastern Imperial Palace, the atmosphere in the Eastern Imperial Palace was very good. At least everyone was very united. Therefore, when Xiao Chen activated the teleportation array and asked for help, no one chose to refuse or retreat. Very quickly, figures walked out of the teleportation array in the Extreme Doctrine Palace's small world. When they saw that no one had walked out, the faces of the Supreme Elders of the Extreme Doctrine Palace turned ugly. As for the group of War Ancestor Realm Kings who had reached an agreement with the Supreme Grand Elder and were prepared to attack Xiao Chen and Yi Qintang, they didn't know what to do at this moment. If it was just Xiao Chen and Lin Yun, they definitely wouldn't be afraid. However, it was obviously no longer a problem between Xiao Chen and the Supreme Grand Elder. It had escalated to a battle between 2 major forces. In the face of such a situation, as long as one wasn't a fool, one would know that one shouldn't get involved. Otherwise, one would probably end up as cannon fodder. After all, many of the kings present didn't have such a powerful force behind them. There were no sovereigns either. Many people had already thought of retreating and quietly retreated into the distance. Obviously, these people didn't want to be involved in this matter anymore. Xiao Chen didn't stop them. There were so many people present. If he killed all of them, it wouldn't be a small matter. Of course, Xiao Chen wouldn't let the culprit go. Xiao Chen, you've only just arrived in the central region and you've already caused such a big trouble? Lai Wan and the others walked out of the teleportation array and looked at Xiao Chen as soon as they saw him. They had joined Emperor Dong's palace for quite some time and were familiar with each other, so they naturally spoke casually. Hearing Lai Wan's words, Xiao Chen smiled bitterly. This has nothing to do with me. Someone wants to take my life. In response, Xiao Chen replied with a smile and teased each other. At this moment, Zixian looked around and frowned slightly. This is Extreme Doctrine Palace? Zixian had been to the central region before and it wasn't just once. From the clothes of the Supreme Grand Elder and the others, she quickly determined that this was Extreme Doctrine Palace. Zixian had some understanding of Extreme Doctrine Palace. It was a major force that wasn't weaker than Emperor Dong's palace. It was even stronger than Emperor Dong's palace. It was no wonder that Xiao Chen would activate the teleportation array. Facing Extreme Doctrine Palace, it wasn't something that Xiao Chen and Lin Yun could handle. Seeing the kings of Emperor Dong's palace walk out of the teleportation array one after another, the Supreme Grand Elders of Extreme Doctrine Palace looked increasingly displeased. It has been a long time since I last visited. However, after so many years, your Green Emperor seems to be regressing. The moment he opened his mouth, he directly looked down on the Supreme Elder of the Extreme Path Palace. Hearing this, everyone, including the Supreme First Elder, was furious but did not dare to say anything. There was nothing they could do about it. After all, he was a ruler. How could they refute him when he spoke? Even the Supreme First Elder chose to remain silent at this moment. He no longer looked as arrogant as before. In response, the other Supreme Elders looked at him with displeasure. Look, this is all because of you. Now that things have gotten out of hand, why have you become mute again? You're already so old. Why don't you consider the consequences when you do things? After this incident, the Supreme First Elder's prestige had indeed been greatly reduced. However, now was not the time to hold him accountable. What they needed to do now was to face the people from Emperor Dong's palace. Naturally, since Dong Wang had personally appeared, this matter would not be resolved with just a few words. However, with so many people present, no one could be mentioned in the same breath as Dong Wang. Only the patriarch could come out of seclusion. Just as the Supreme Elders were silently calling for their patriarch to appear, an old voice rang out as though he had heard everyone's thoughts. Why have you come to my extreme path palace, old man? As the voice rang out, an old man in a long green robe appeared in front of Dong Wang. Seeing the old man appear, the Supreme Elders of the Extreme Path Palace heaved a sigh of relief. Fortunately, the patriarch had arrived in time. Otherwise, they would not have been able to hold on. Since the patriarch of the Extreme Path Palace had personally appeared, it meant that this matter was no longer something that the warring ancestors could decide. Begging for collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations. How could they be in the mood to care about such things? After all, every single one of them had reached an agreement with the first Supreme Elder. Now that old man Dong Wang was here, the Supreme Tao Palace had a ruler who could contend against him. But what about them? They did not have any rulers behind them. What if Emperor Dong's palace wanted to settle the score with them? For a moment, many people panicked. If they had known this would happen, they would not have had any disputes with the Supreme Great Elder, no matter what they said. Everyone felt that they were in danger. As a result, many people bore a grudge against the Supreme Great Elder. It was this idiot who did not know anything. Now, he had dragged all of them down with him. No one cared about what the crowd was thinking. Everyone was looking at Dong Wang and the Supreme Tao Palace's great ancestor. Both of them were ready to attack. Since they could not talk it out, they could only fight. As they spoke, both of them were ready to attack. However, at that moment, a figure suddenly blocked them. It was an old woman. Seeing the old woman appear, both Dong Wang and the Supreme Tao Palace's great ancestor were stunned. Then, both of them politely cupped their hands. Greetings, Black Granny. They were none other than the two most trusted powerhouses by the Fire Phoenix Star Lord's side. They were Elder Master Bai and Black Granny of all Black Grannies. They did not expect Black Granny to appear here. Faced with Dong Wang and the Supreme Tao Palace's great ancestor's salute, Black Granny looked indifferent. Are the two of you trying to destroy the Supreme Tao Palace? Black Granny, this guy is going too far. Heh, what a joke. My people are about to be killed. Now I'm the one who's going too far? Dong Wang sneered at the Supreme Tao Palace's great ancestor. Please collect, vote, recommend. You're tuning in to the Phoenix Knights YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.